Ever wonder if the world you perceive is truly real? What if the very fabric of our modern existence is woven with contradictions so profound they'll make your head spin right before you drift off to sleep? For the next 3 hours, we'll unravel today's most mind-bending paradoxes, designed to lull you into a deep, thought-provoking slumber. Let's start with first, reality compression effect. Imagine reality as an ocean, vast, deep, unpredictable. Every wave is a moment, every ripple a detail. When we first experience it, the ocean is alive, breathing in its own complexity. But the moment we try to capture it, through measurements, statistics, models, we begin draining it into a small glass jar. The jar may be neat, portable, and easy to study, but the ocean is gone. This is the reality compression effect. The more data we gather to define reality, the more we shrink it into something that fits our tools, and the more we distort what it truly is. It begins with a noble goal, to understand the world. We collect numbers, we classify, we categorize. We think that by doing this, we will preserve reality in a pure form, like a photograph that never fades. But reality is not a fixed object. It is a living process. The moment we slice it into datasets and graphs, we lose the connections, the irregularities, the breadth between the facts. We exchange the raw, tangled truth for a clean, simplified version that we can handle. And this simplification is where distortion begins. Take a person, for example. You might try to describe them through their height, their weight, their age, their job title, their education, their income, their political affiliation. You could fill entire spreadsheets with traits. But no matter how many columns you add, you will never capture the way their voice trembles when they speak about their first heartbreak, or the unexplainable energy they bring into a room. You can measure 1,000 variables and still miss the very thing that makes them who they are. Yet, once the data is collected, we often start believing that those measurements are the person. The infinite complexity collapses into a compressed identity, easy to store, but false. The same thing happens on a global scale. Economists measure GDP as if it is the pulse of a nation, but GDP ignores unpaid work, ignores emotional well-being, ignores environmental destruction. It's like measuring the health of a forest only by counting the number of logs we've cut from it. The number is clean, precise, and deeply misleading. Our faith in that number becomes dangerous because it feels scientific, even though it has amputated most of the truth. And here's the most unsettling part. The more data we collect, the worse this compression becomes. You would think that more information means a fuller picture. But when our tools are designed to reduce complexity into categories, more data often just means more compression. Imagine zooming in on a high-resolution image, but instead of revealing more detail, each zoom replaces the real texture with pixelated blocks. You have more pixels than before, but the image is less alive. In science, this is known as overfitting and oversimplification. A climate model, for instance, might start with millions of data points about temperature, humidity, wind, ocean currents, and more. But to make it usable, it must be reduced into equations that can run on computers. In the process, rare but important anomalies get smoothed out. Predictions become less about reality and more about the assumptions baked into the model. We think we're mapping the truth, but we're often mapping the limits of our own perspective. History gives us chilling examples. The ancient world was filled with complex oral traditions, stories, rituals, subtle cultural codes. When writing systems emerged, people tried to preserve these in texts. But writing froze fluid traditions into rigid words. Nuances were lost. Whole layers of meaning vanished because ink could not carry tone, rhythm, or the shared context of a storyteller's voice. The data survived, but the living reality died. In the digital age, this effect is accelerating. Social media reduces human life into likes, shares, and followers. Each post, stripped of its surrounding moments, becomes a data point for algorithms to sort and predict. And those algorithms, optimized for engagement, present a version of reality that is not just compressed, but engineered to be addictive. Over time, the compressed version begins to feel more real than the world it was based on. The simulation replaces the original. Think about how we talk about ourselves. Job interviews, dating apps, even casual conversations often revolve around condensed facts. I'm 32, I work in finance, I like hiking. This is not dishonesty. It's a survival adaptation to a world that demands quick definitions. But in doing this, we train ourselves to see not just others, but our own selves as data points. We begin editing out the unmeasurable parts of our lives because they don't fit into the models. The infinite turns finite. The ocean fits into the jar. The reality compression effect is not just a technical issue, it's a philosophical one. It forces us to ask, do we want to understand reality or just control it? Because the more we compress, the easier it becomes to manipulate. A person reduced to demographic data is easier to target with ads. A society reduced to economic numbers is easier to steer towards certain policies. The cost of this control is that we stop seeing reality as it is, and only see the version that serves our purposes. Escaping this trap doesn't mean abandoning data. Data is a tool, and tools can be used with care. It means resisting the belief that the model is the reality. It means remembering that between every data point is a web of connections too vast to record, and that those invisible connections are often where the truth lives. It means being suspicious when someone claims to have the full picture, because in a compressed world, the full picture doesn't exist. There will always be a tension between the living complexity of reality and the frozen simplicity of our models. We will always be tempted to choose the clean map over the messy territory. But if we forget that the map is not the territory, we risk living in a reality that is nothing more than an echo of itself, a flattened copy, endlessly replicated, until no one remembers what the original looked like. And maybe that's the deepest danger. That one day, after generations of compression, we might look at the map and believe we are looking at the world. We will not notice that the ocean is gone. We will only see the jar and call it reality. We live under the constant illusion that the way we see the world belongs to us, that our thoughts, our beliefs, our judgments are the pure product of an inner self, an autonomous mind moving through reality with independent clarity. But if you trace them back, you find something unsettling. Every fragment of what you call your perception was given to you, placed there by forces you didn't choose, long before you knew you could choose anything at all. The language in your head is not your invention. Someone spoke it into you before you could speak back. The categories you use to sort the world, good, bad, beautiful, ugly, were handed down to you, wrapped in the voices of parents, teachers, strangers, and systems you never voted for. Even the tone of your inner dialogue has an accent, inherited from the emotional rhythms of the people who surrounded you in your earliest days. Think about the foods you love, the songs that move you, the images you find beautiful. Do you really believe those preferences bloomed in a vacuum? Or did they grow from seeds scattered by every billboard you passed, every movie you watched, every offhand comment you overheard from someone you admired? You tell yourself your opinions are yours, but what about the raw material from which those opinions were built? That came from somewhere else, often without your awareness. It was smuggled into you through repetition, culture, and proximity, until you couldn't tell the difference between your own voice and the echo of someone else's. The paradox is this: perception feels like the most intimate possession you have, yet it is almost entirely constructed from pieces you didn't select. And once built, it doesn't ask for permission to rule you. You don't get to wake up each morning and re-engineer the framework. You operate inside it, convinced it's the real shape of the world. Imagine walking through a hall of mirrors, but each mirror has been subtly altered, not to distort you grotesquely, but to make you believe it's showing you something accurate. One mirror was made by your childhood home, one by your education, one by the news you consume, another by the things you've been denied access to. And as you move, you forget the mirrors exist at all. You think you're looking directly at reality, but you're looking through lenses chosen by others. And it gets stranger. Even the act of trying to free your perception, reading new perspectives, questioning your beliefs, still depends on the tools and frameworks that were given to you in the first place. The scalpel you use to dissect your mind is made from the same material you're trying to cut apart. You are both the locked room and the key, and neither of them were built by you. This is why two people can look at the same event and walk away with opposite truths. Their eyes are not just seeing, they are interpreting through layers of invisible influence. Influence that feels like selfhood, but is, in many ways, inherited programming. You may ask, if perception isn't truly ours, then what is? The uncomfortable answer might be, very little. But within that little lies the only kind of freedom we can touch. We can learn to notice the patterns, to spot the reflexive reactions that arrive without conscious thought, to pause and ask, where did this come from? Who gave it to me? Do I want to keep it? That act alone, of questioning the source, doesn't erase the paradox, but it loosens its grip. You begin to see how often your reality is a curated feed, and how many of your convictions are only as real as the repetition that built them. But the deeper you go, the more disquieting it becomes, because you realize that even the impulse to question your perception might not be yours. Maybe it came from a book you read, or a teacher who once told you to think critically, or a stray sentence from someone you barely knew. Maybe even your desire for autonomy is just another program, and yet you keep searching. Because whether the search is truly yours or not, it feels like the only thing worth doing. To peel back the layers, even if you never find the core. To hold your perception up to the light and admit that it is, at best, a collage. A beautiful, flawed, secondhand collage that you've been calling me all along. Freedom through constraint. Imagine being told you can paint anything you want. An endless canvas, infinite colors, no rules. At first, it feels exhilarating, but then something strange happens. Your mind stalls. You dabble here, stroke there, but the sheer possibility crushes direction. Now imagine the opposite. Someone hands you only 3 colors, a tiny sheet of paper, and tells you to create a masterpiece. It sounds limiting. Yet suddenly, your brain starts working differently. You're forced to mix colors in unconventional ways, to use space creatively, to find beauty in minimalism. What felt like a cage turns into a spark. This is the paradox of freedom through constraint, that sometimes the walls around us don't confine our creativity, they define it. We tend to believe freedom means total absence of limits, but the human mind is not built to thrive in infinite possibility. Too much space can dissolve our urgency, scatter our focus, and tempt us into complacency. Boundaries, however, act like the banks of a river. Without them, water spreads thin, stagnant. With them, it gains direction, force, momentum. This is why some of the most revolutionary breakthroughs in art, science, and philosophy were born under tight restrictions, not in times of limitless resources. Think about haiku poetry. 17 syllables, 3 lines. An entire emotional world must fit into that narrow form. And yet, within those constraints, poets find infinite variation. Or consider the early days of filmmaking, when cameras were static, sound was impossible, and editing was crude. Directors didn't lament these barriers, they innovated around them. Every silent film you've ever admired is the product of impossibility transformed into style. The very absence of a tool becomes a tool itself. It's not just in art. In 1970, NASA's Apollo 13 mission suffered an explosion in space. The astronauts were stranded in a crippled spacecraft. Engineers on Earth couldn't order new parts. They could only use what was on board. Their job? Find a way to fit a square filter into a round hole to save the crew from suffocating. They solved it with tape, plastic, and sheer ingenuity. The constraint wasn't just physical, it was life or death urgency. And under that pressure, innovation bloomed. You see this in music too. Blues and jazz emerged from limitation. Few instruments, improvised repetition, restricted chord structures. In fact, some of the most iconic guitar riffs in history came from broken strings or damaged amps. Constraints force the artist to adapt, and adaptation is where originality thrives. It's the friction between what you want to do and what you can do that generates sparks. Even personal life works this way. Imagine you set no budget for yourself. Money flows freely. At first, it feels liberating, but soon, purchases lose meaning and desire dulls. Now imagine you have just enough to cover the essentials. You start thinking more deeply about each choice, finding ways to make less feel like more. This principle applies to time as well. Give yourself a year to finish a project and you'll procrastinate. Give yourself 3 days and you'll enter a heightened state of focus. Scarcity breeds creativity because it forces the mind into corners where it must discover doors. Psychologists call this creative constraint theory. The brain loves puzzles. When faced with a gap between a goal and the tools available, it responds by mapping hidden paths. If everything is available instantly, there's no puzzle to solve, no reason to explore beyond the obvious. Limits sharpen the problem, and in sharpening the problem, they sharpen the mind. But here's the deeper truth. Freedom without boundaries can be an illusion. A blank infinity might feel like liberation, but it often leads to drifting, indecision, and shallow creation. True freedom isn't the absence of structure, it's the ability to operate at your peak within it. The paradox is that structure can give us wings, while total openness can leave us grounded. Look at minimalism in design. Stripping away options forces the creator to choose with precision. Every element must justify its existence. The result is often more powerful than an overstuffed creation because nothing is wasted. Similarly, some of history's most impactful speeches are the shortest. Lincoln's Gettysburg Address lasted under 3 minutes, yet it reshaped a nation's spirit. Brevity is a constraint, and in that brevity lies potency. Even nature understands this. Evolution is essentially creativity under constraint. Species adapt within the harsh limits of their environment. The cheetah is not the fastest land animal because it had endless freedom to evolve. It is fast because survival demanded it. The coral reef is breathtakingly diverse, not because the ocean gave it boundless space, but because it thrives in a narrow band of conditions. Constraints channel life into extraordinary forms. There's also a psychological liberation in working within limits. Boundaries simplify choice, and when choice is simplified, action follows. Think of a writer given the prompt to write anything versus one told to write a story in which the moon disappears. The second will likely begin faster, dive deeper, and reach more surprising ideas, not despite the restriction, but because of it. Constraints free us from the paralysis of possibility. The challenge is to reframe how we see limits. Most people view them as obstacles to be overcome or avoided. But what if they are tools? What if the cage is not there to trap us, but to guide the tiger within us toward its prey? Great architects know this. The load-bearing limits of a building don't hinder creativity. They shape it. They make the impossible possible by forcing design to meet reality. And maybe that's the most empowering truth of all. When you accept a boundary, you stop wasting energy fighting it. Instead, you start playing with it, bending it, reimagining it. This doesn't mean settling. It means seeing the rules as the frame in which your masterpiece will hang. A painting without a frame risks being lost. A life without limits risks being directionless. So, next time you feel trapped by a deadline, a shortage, or a rule, pause. Recognize that this might be the moment your creativity wakes up. This is the forge where innovation is hammered into shape. The tighter the grip, the sharper the edge. Freedom is not found in running from the wall. It's found in learning how to dance with it. And sometimes, the steps we create in that dance are the most original we will ever take. Consciousness, feedback loop. You become aware of a thought, so ordinary at first, it could have been any other. But then, instead of passing through you, it turns and looks back. You notice that you are noticing it. That small act, the mind watching itself, is the spark that changes everything. Because the moment you observe your own thinking, the thought itself begins to change. It reshapes in response to your attention, bends under the weight of being seen. And that new shape, in turn, alters the one who is seeing it, you. You're not just watching your mind. Your watching becomes another thought for the mind to process, which changes the mind again. And now you're aware of that. It's a loop, a feedback system with no beginning, no end, only constant revision. Each layer of awareness modifies the layer beneath it. Each recognition rewrites the thing recognized. Your mind is no longer a fixed place where thoughts appear. It's a shifting hall of mirrors, each reflection casting back something altered, something less certain than the moment before. You think about a memory. The act of recalling it distorts it slightly. You become aware you are distorting it. That awareness alters not just the memory, but the way you remember remembering. Soon you're not holding a single event in your head. You're holding the endless versions it became as you observed it, revised it, reshaped it in the light of your own attention. The same happens with feelings. You feel sadness. You notice the sadness. Your noticing changes the sadness, maybe softens it, maybe deepens it. You observe the change, and the observation transforms it again. Before long, you're not even sure if what you're feeling is the original emotion or something entirely constructed from the act of watching yourself feel. And the loop doesn't stop at emotions or memories. It consumes identity. You think of yourself as a certain kind of person. The thought itself is observed. That observation shifts it, slightly at first, then more dramatically. You catch yourself in the act of shifting and wonder if the self you're imagining is just the echo of the last version you looked at. In chasing the truth of who you are, you keep stepping on the trail you're trying to follow, blurring it with each step. It should feel destabilizing, and sometimes it does. But there's also a strange beauty here, because if every observation changes you, then you are never finished. You are not static, not trapped in the architecture of who you were yesterday. Every time you turn your gaze inward, you are sculpting something new, even if you don't mean to. Yet the loop has a cost. The more you watch yourself think, the harder it is to believe in any thought completely. Certainty slips through your hands because you've seen how each idea bends under scrutiny. You've watched it mutate into something else, simply because it knew it was being watched. You begin to wonder if there's any such thing as an unaltered self, a pure moment of mind untouched by its own gaze. And then the deepest realization comes, the one that doesn't fade even when the loop is quiet. You are not outside this process. You are the process. The you observing is not separate from what's being observed. Every version of you exists only in the moment of being looked at by some other version, like a torch passing its own flame forward in time. You've never been a fixed entity, only a continuous sequence of minds making minds. You try to remember what it was like before you noticed this. You can't. Because the act of trying changes that memory too. You see now why the loop is inescapable. There's no first thought untouched by observation, no final thought that will escape being reshaped. The watching is the thinking is the watching. Some people might call this a trap, a spiral with no exit. But if you stay with it long enough, it stops feeling like a prison. It feels like breathing, constant movement, constant renewal. You can't step out of it any more than you can step out of being alive. And maybe that's the point. Because in this loop, you are not the end result of your thoughts. You are the shifting, shimmering current of them. You are the river watching its own water flow, knowing it will never pass the same drop twice, and that the act of looking changes the current's course. And in that endless reshaping, there's a strange kind of freedom, not the freedom to hold on to one unchanging truth about yourself, but the freedom to keep becoming someone new, every time you dare to look. Innovation paradox, trap. We tell ourselves that innovation is progress, that each new invention, each leap forward in technology brings us closer to a life of ease, of freedom, of simplicity. And yet, with every time-saving breakthrough, life doesn't slow down. It accelerates. The tools that promise to free us have chained us to an even more intricate and demanding reality. Once, the rhythm of life was set by the seasons, the rising and setting of the sun. Communication was measured in days, travel in weeks, ambitions in decades. The tools were simple, their purposes clear. But as the wheel turned, as machines replaced hands and electricity replaced firelight, we began to dream bigger and faster. We built devices to shorten our labor, to carry our messages, to store our memories. And it worked. The harvest that once took months could now be done in hours. Letters that once took weeks to cross oceans could arrive instantly through invisible signals in the air. We celebrated. We thought the finish line was near. But with every solved problem, we created a new one. The moment we sped up communication, the world demanded we respond faster. The moment we made work easier, we were expected to do more of it. The moment we invented machines to save time, we filled that saved time with more tasks, more responsibilities, more noise. We have automated the simple so thoroughly that only the complex remains. Think about the smartphone in your hand. It replaced dozens of tools, the telephone, the camera, the newspaper, the map, the clock. It put all of them into one smooth slab of glass. And yet, your life is not simpler. It's not calmer. Because along with that power came the constant pressure to be reachable, to be available, to consume and produce endlessly. You no longer live in your home or your workplace. You live inside a stream of notifications, a world where someone always wants something from you, where silence feels like an error and disconnection feels like failure. We created email to replace the inefficiency of physical letters, to save hours of travel and delivery. And now, people receive hundreds of emails a day, each expecting a reply within minutes. We built cars to shorten the time between destinations, and cities stretched farther apart, making the car no longer a luxury, but a necessity. We built planes to connect continents, And now our work, our families, our obligations are scattered across the globe, demanding our presence in multiple places at once. It is the paradox of innovation. The better we become at solving problems, the more problems appear, because efficiency invites expectation. The faster we can do something, the more we are expected to do. The more we can know, the more we are expected to keep up with. Innovation has not made the world smaller. It has made it denser, heavier, more relentless. Consider the way we measure productivity today. We no longer ask, did the job get done? But how many more jobs can you take on? The tools that were meant to unburden us now fuel a cycle in which rest is seen as laziness and constant activity is a badge of worth. The hammer was once for building. Now it is for building faster, building more, building until there is no time left to stop and look at what we have built. Even in leisure, innovation traps us. Entertainment is available at every moment, in every form, and yet we spend hours scrolling, searching for something to watch, paralyzed by choice. Social connection has been expanded to the point where we can speak to anyone at any time, yet loneliness rises because quantity has replaced depth. We automate our homes so that lights turn on by themselves, yet the settings and configurations demand constant tweaking, updates, and maintenance. We thought the machine age would free us from the grind of survival, but it has only replaced physical exhaustion with mental overload. And this overload is invisible. A tired body can rest. A tired mind rarely does. The human brain, bombarded with the demands of an interconnected world, struggles to find silence in a place where silence no longer exists. And still, we innovate. We push forward because the alternative feels like falling behind. To reject a new tool is to risk being excluded from the systems that run modern life. To slow down is to vanish. So we race onward, building layers upon layers of complexity, believing that somewhere ahead is the version of life we were promised, effortless, serene, simple. But the truth is, the more we chase it, the further away it seems to move. The innovation paradox. Trap is not that technology has failed us. It is that it has succeeded, so well, so completely, that our lives have restructured themselves around its presence. We no longer live beside our inventions. We live inside them. They shape the way we work, the way we think, the way we rest, until rest itself is a form of work. Scheduled, optimized, monitored, and here lies the unsettling question. If every step forward brings more demands, then what happens when we reach the limits of our capacity? When every minute of every day is filled, when every ounce of attention is accounted for, what will innovation mean then? Will we create machines to think for us, feel for us, live for us? And if we do, will we have anything left that is truly ours? Because the trap is not just in the tools, the trap is in us, in the belief that the solution to every problem is more speed, more power, more efficiency. But maybe what we have been building all along is not freedom, but a cage so intricate and advanced that we mistake it for progress. And once the walls of that cage close in, no amount of innovation will break us out, because we will have designed it to fit us perfectly. Hyperconnection isolation. Imagine a world where every person you know is only a tap away. Messages fly across oceans in milliseconds. Voices travel without wires, and photos from the other side of the planet appear instantly in your hand. On the surface, we have never been more connected. Yet, beneath this constant flow of digital contact, a quiet emptiness grows. We find ourselves surrounded by an invisible crowd, and still, we feel alone. This is the paradox of hyperconnection isolation. At first, the promise of digital connection feels intoxicating. You can speak to an old friend in another country while standing in line for coffee. You can join group chats with hundreds of people who share your interests. Your feed overflows with updates from every corner of your social circle. But what begins as a web of closeness gradually becomes a thin membrane between you and the world. You see more of people's lives than ever before, yet you touch less of them. You know their status updates, their profile pictures, their curated moments, but the sound of their laughter in a real room becomes rare, almost foreign. Our brains evolved for connection that was physical, textured, and unfiltered. Faces in the same space, voices shaped by air, gestures that carried meaning beyond words. When we replace this with text bubbles and emojis, something essential erodes. The human nervous system cannot fully translate affection, comfort, or empathy through pixels alone. We can interpret symbols of emotion, but the feeling itself fades in the translation. And when all our interactions are filtered through screens, we start mistaking the symbol for the experience. Paradoxically, hyperconnection makes solitude more visible. You can scroll through hundreds of smiling faces and still feel an ache in your chest because you're not actually with them. They are there and not there, ghosts in a digital corridor. Each time you see a friend online but they don't respond, a small doubt creeps in. Do they care? Are you important? The same network that allows us to reach each other instantly also magnifies every delay, every silence. In physical life, a pause between meetings or conversations feels natural. Online, silence feels like rejection. This illusion of closeness can even numb us to the absence of real intimacy. A like on your post, a short reply to your story, an emoji reaction. These micro-interactions can trick you into thinking your social needs are met. But deep down, the part of you that needs unbroken presence, the warmth of shared space, begins to starve. The hunger is subtle at first, like missing a meal or two. Over time, it becomes a chronic malnutrition of the soul, and it doesn't just affect friendships. Romantic relationships, too, can dissolve into a constant stream of digital check-ins rather than shared life. Instead of living in moments together, couples can find themselves maintaining a running commentary about their moments, sending updates instead of experiences. The relationship becomes a chain of texts rather than a fabric of memories. Worse, the design of digital platforms often exploits this. They encourage constant posting, constant checking, constant refreshing, not because this deepens connection, but because it keeps you engaged. The metrics, followers, views, reactions, become a substitute for emotional reciprocity. You may end up seeking validation from a faceless audience instead of building meaning with a handful of real people. And in that shift, the sense of belonging erodes. Ironically, hyperconnection can also make it harder to be truly alone. In a world where you can always reach out to someone, genuine solitude, the kind where you sit with yourself, undistracted, becomes rare. And without solitude, we lose one of the main ingredients of real connection, the ability to show up whole. If you are never alone with your thoughts, your relationships become filled with noise rather than substance. You can see this effect in subtle ways. A teenager with hundreds of online friends, but no one they can call when they are in trouble. An adult who attends virtual happy hours, yet can't remember the last time they hugged a friend. A family chat that's constantly active, while the actual family sits in separate rooms, each lit by their own screen. The infrastructure for connection is everywhere, yet the experience of connection feels further away than ever. The truth is, technology is not the enemy, it's the imbalance that isolates us. When digital connection replaces physical connection instead of enhancing it, we end up living in a simulation of intimacy. The people we love become data points in a feed, and we, unknowingly, become the same to them. Escaping hyperconnection. Isolation doesn't mean abandoning technology, it means remembering its place, as a bridge, not a home. The bridge should take us somewhere, toward meetings, dinners, shared laughter, unplanned silences, and long walks with no agenda. It should connect us back to the kind of moments that can't be scrolled past, that can't be liked or shared, only lived. Because one day, we might wake up and realize that we know more about people's online presence than their real presence, and that our own presence in their lives has been reduced to a profile picture. And on that day, it won't be the number of connections that matters, but the number of souls we can sit with in a room without a screen between us and feel less alone. Choice overload paralysis. We grow up believing that freedom is the ability to choose, that the more options we have, the more control we hold over our lives. It sounds perfect in theory, an endless horizon of possibilities, each waiting for us to step forward and claim it. But the moment you stand at the center of too many choices, something strange happens. The horizon stops looking like freedom and starts feeling like a trap. You tell yourself you'll pick one, just one, the one that fits you best. But as you scan the options, your mind begins to fracture. Every choice is a fork in the road you can never unwalk. Each one comes with its own set of possible gains and irreversible losses. And the more you think about them, the more each path seems to bleed into the others until they all blur into static. This is the paradox of choice overload. It doesn't push you toward action, it freezes you in place, because for every option you might take, there are dozens you must abandon. And those abandoned paths aren't neutral, they haunt you. You start imagining the versions of yourself who chose differently, living out lives you can no longer touch. You scroll through streaming platforms for an hour and watch nothing. You stand in the grocery aisle, unable to pick between near-identical products. You stare at your own life plans, each one plausible, each one promising some version of fulfillment, and your hands remain still. The mind wasn't designed for this kind of abundance. In the past, choices were narrow, limited. You picked from what was in front of you, and the cost of a wrong choice was immediate. Now, the illusion of infinite possibility comes with an invisible tax. Every decision feels like gambling with your one finite life, and the higher the perceived stakes, the harder it is to move. Even when you finally choose, the victory feels hollow, because the moment you commit, your mind drifts back to the options you left behind. You wonder if you chose wrong. You imagine the better outcome that could have been waiting just beyond the one you didn't take. And in that way, choice overload doesn't just freeze you, it follows you. It turns every decision into a breeding ground for regret. Some people respond by simplifying their lives to the extreme, reducing their wardrobe to one style of clothing, eating the same meals, limiting their routines. They do this not because they hate variety, but because they've learned that too much of it corrodes the ability to act. They choose fewer choices in order to choose at all. But for most of us, we remain caught in the maze. Our hands hover over keyboards, shopping carts, applications, relationships, each choice dangling in front of us like a door we could open, but don't. Because opening one means closing all the others. The cruelest part is that we confuse this paralysis with carefulness. We tell ourselves we're just being thorough, that we'll choose when we're ready, when we have more information. But more information often makes it worse. Each new detail adds another branch to the decision tree, another set of futures to weigh, another shadow of regret before the choice is even made. And so, we wait. We wait for the perfect moment, the perfect option, the perfect sign that will tell us we've found the right one. But that moment never comes, because perfection isn't a choice. It's a mirage. The longer we stand still, the further it recedes. What if freedom isn't the ability to choose from everything, but the ability to move forward without needing everything? What if the only real choice is to act, even when the other doors slam shut behind us? Because in the end, the life we live is not the sum of all possible paths. It's the sum of the ones we took. And the tragedy of choice overload is that it can leave you with nothing but the memory of roads you never walked. Future nostalgia effect. It's a strange ache, one that pulls not backward into memory, but forward into a horizon you've never touched. You find yourself longing for a moment that hasn't happened, for a chapter of your life that exists only in speculation. The air smells of an imagined summer. The streets are paved in a dream's geometry. The people are shadows you have not met yet, but somehow miss already. This is the future nostalgia effect, the bittersweet yearning for a perfect tomorrow that your mind has already begun to romanticize. It begins innocently enough. Maybe you're daydreaming about moving to a new city, meeting someone extraordinary, starting a career that changes you. You play out the scenes in your head with cinematic clarity, the sunlight through unfamiliar windows, the exact sound of laughter in a place you haven't lived. And somehow, in those quiet moments, you feel the same tug in your chest that old photographs bring, a longing not to go back, but to arrive. Our brains are wired for this. The same mental machinery that lets us replay cherished memories can also run simulations of potential futures. But memory has the benefit of having happened. Future nostalgia builds on vapor. It is a castle of mist, where every corridor is perfect because it's never been walked. You can imagine the joy without the disappointments, the warmth without the winters, the love without the inevitable fights. And yet, even knowing it's fiction, the longing feels real. This effect is dangerous in its beauty, because when you finally reach that future you've been craving, reality has no choice but to be messier. The light won't always fall the way you imagined. The people will carry their own shadows, and the music in the background will sometimes be drowned out by noise. In that moment, you might grieve, not just for what you didn't get, but for the perfection you once believed was waiting. You lose not only the dream, but the dreamer's version of it. But perhaps the future nostalgia effect isn't about arriving at all. Perhaps it's about having something to yearn toward, a psychological compass pointing to a better version of yourself. Athletes envision their greatest victory before the race. Writers imagine the book tour before the first draft. Lovers picture a shared home before the first kiss. These visions pull us forward, even if they are destined to be edited by reality. There's also something poetic about missing what has not yet happened. It suggests we are creatures of hope, that part of us is always living in an unfinished story. Our minds create memory shadows of what could be, giving us emotional previews of paths we haven't taken. And sometimes, those previews are enough to push us to make them real, even if imperfectly. The trick is to hold these imagined futures lightly, to let them inspire without imprisoning you in expectation. Because if you cling too tightly to the perfect mental postcard, you might overlook the beauty of the actual street you end up walking. Future nostalgia can be a star to steer by, but not a promise written in the sky. And yet, even knowing all this, you'll still feel it. On a quiet night, you'll find yourself missing a laugh you haven't heard yet, a place your feet haven't touched, a love you haven't met. You'll feel the impossible pull of that imagined perfection, and you'll know, in some secret part of your soul, that longing forward is just as human as longing back. Progress regression cycle. It's easy to think of progress as a straight line, one long climb from darkness into light. We invent, we discover, we refine. We cure diseases that once ravaged entire civilizations. We connect continents with the touch of a finger. We land machines on other worlds. And for a moment, we believe the past has been left behind. But then, almost imperceptibly at first, the old problems return, wearing new clothes, speaking new languages, but carrying the same ancient bones. You can see it everywhere once you start looking. We conquer famine with industrial farming, only to face obesity, malnutrition of a different kind, and soil stripped of life. We end plagues with antibiotics, only to breed new ones, resistant and harder to kill. We create tools of mass communication to unite the world, only to watch them splinter reality into echo chambers where truth becomes negotiable. Every victory contains the seed of its own undoing. It's not that we're careless, it's that the very engines of our progress have always run on human nature, and human nature has not advanced at the same speed as our machines. We still crave power, belonging, certainty, control, just as we did when the tallest structure we'd ever built was a temple of stone. And so, the problems we think we've buried rise again, shaped by the tools of the present, but driven by the same instincts of the past. Violence never vanished. It became cleaner, faster, more remote. Prejudice didn't dissolve. It found new categories, new masks, new algorithms to hide behind. Manipulation didn't fade. It learned to travel through fiber optic cables instead of whispered courts and smoky backrooms. The arenas change, the weapons change, the players change. But the game itself remains eerily familiar. There's a rhythm to it, a cycle of solving and resurrecting. We remove one set of chains only to forge another, lighter perhaps, but still binding. Sometimes the cycle is obvious, like a shadow following close behind. Other times, it takes decades before we realize the problem we're facing is just an older one in disguise, wearing the novelty of the present like camouflage. And maybe this is why the cycle is so hard to break. Each new disguise makes the problem look like something unique, unprecedented. We tell ourselves we are facing something entirely modern, and so we forget to look backward for its roots. We build solutions aimed at the symptoms of now, never seeing that the sickness itself is ancient. But there's something quietly hopeful hidden in this recognition. If the problems keep returning because they are human at their core, then maybe the real frontier isn't technological or political or economic, it's personal. Maybe the leap forward we need isn't in what we build, but in how we think, how we choose, how we see each other. Because until those inner structures evolve, the outer ones will keep echoing the same old flaws, no matter how futuristic their surfaces look. The progress regression cycle isn't a failure of progress. It's a reminder that progress isn't enough on its own. Without reflection, without wisdom, without the courage to dismantle the instincts that birthed the problems in the first place, we will keep looping. Faster, more efficiently, with brighter lights and sharper edges. And one day, when we've reached the height of what we thought was possible, we may look around and realize we are living inside an ancient story, just rewritten in a new tongue. The tools will be unrecognizable, The struggles will feel strangely familiar, and the choice will be the same as it has always been, to keep cycling or to finally step outside of it. Authenticity, performance loop. We live in an age obsessed with authenticity. We praise it, seek it, brand ourselves with it. Be real, they say. Be yourself. But here's the quiet, uncomfortable truth. Once authenticity becomes an expectation, it stops being real. The moment we know we're being watched, even by the smallest audience, we start performing. And the performance can be so subtle, so convincing that we forget it's a mask at all. You tell a story from your life and pause to emphasize the parts that will land best. You share a photo caught in the moment, but you took it 3 times to get the right angle. You speak your mind, but only the parts you've rehearsed in your head, sanding off the edges that might make someone uncomfortable. None of it feels like lying. After all, you're still telling the truth. But it's a truth that has been filtered, arranged, and lit just right. We've learned to anticipate how we will be perceived, to predict the effect of every word and gesture. And because we can predict it, we can control it. That control becomes addictive. We start curating our sincerity, making sure it appears effortless, never admitting how much effort it actually takes. The performance is invisible because it's built from the same material as our real selves, memories, feelings, expressions. But the difference is in the delivery. Think about social media profiles, podcasts, interviews, even casual conversations. When people present their raw, unfiltered selves, they are often at their most calculated. The pauses, the self-deprecating jokes, the moments of apparent vulnerability, these are rehearsed beats, refined through repetition, learned from the reactions they've earned before. And the more they work, the more we repeat them, until our supposed authenticity is just a set of moves we know will get applause. The danger is not that we're pretending to be someone else. It's that we're pretending to be exactly ourselves. The mask is so close to the skin, we can't feel where it ends. And over time, we start performing even when no one is watching, as if we've trained ourselves to live inside an audience's gaze. Somewhere along the way, we forget what unperformed authenticity even feels like. We've learned to monitor ourselves from outside, running an internal camera that never turns off. In a conversation, we're half listening and half imagining how our words will sound when repeated. In solitude, we sometimes catch ourselves narrating our own lives, shaping moments into stories we might tell later. Even our private thoughts become polished. And here's the cruel twist. People can sense when you're not being real, so you double down, working even harder to convince them. You perform authenticity with such skill that no one questions it. They praise your honesty, your openness, your vulnerability, not realizing they're clapping for a role you've been perfecting for years, and the applause feels good. So you keep going. This is the loop. The more we value authenticity, the more pressure we feel to prove it. The more pressure we feel to prove it, the more we perform. The more we perform, the further we get from the very thing we claim to embody. It's a trap with no obvious escape, because dropping the performance entirely would look like just another act, a calculated rebellion against calculation. So what is left? Maybe the truest form of authenticity is not trying to be authentic at all, not announcing it, not shaping it, letting some moments go unshared, some words go unsaid, some feelings remain unpolished and unpresentable, allowing them to exist without an audience, without proof, without the impulse to frame them. But that's rare now, because most of us, whether we admit it or not, have lived in the loop for so long that we don't just wear the mask, we've grown into it. And when you've worn a mask that perfectly fits your own face, taking it off feels like erasing yourself. Infinite upgrade chase. We live in an age where everything promises to be just a little better tomorrow. A faster phone, a sharper camera, a smarter algorithm. A new version, thinner, brighter, quicker, always just over the horizon. The air we breathe is thick with upgrades, and with each one comes the whisper that what we have now is already obsolete. This is the infinite upgrade chase. And the cruelest part is, it doesn't just apply to technology, it rewires the way we think about everything. At first, upgrades feel like progress. They give us something to look forward to, a tangible sign that the future is coming faster than we imagined. The first time you hold a new device, hear a new feature, experience a new interface, it feels like stepping into tomorrow. But tomorrow never stays. Within weeks, sometimes days, what once felt revolutionary becomes normal, and soon, normal starts to feel inadequate. The mind adapts quickly. What was once luxury becomes baseline. A phone that takes flawless photos becomes good enough until you see a friend's that has better night mode. A laptop that once booted instantly feels slow after you try the new model. And so, the cycle turns. Upgrade, adapt, dissatisfaction, repeat. We rarely pause to ask, when did our sense of contentment get outsourced to product release dates? This chase seeps into life beyond gadgets. We begin to expect upgrades in our careers, our relationships, even ourselves. A promotion doesn't feel like enough unless it's followed by another. A home feels temporary until we can afford the next, bigger one. Even our own bodies and minds become projects to optimize. New diets, new routines, new self-improvement trends, because staying the same feels like falling behind. We don't just want better, we start to fear anything that isn't better. The irony is, the more we chase the future, the less we live in the present. We scroll through tech announcements while ignoring the device already in our hands. We think about the job we want instead of doing the one we have. We stand in kitchens dreaming about the next house while eating in the one that shelters us now. Life becomes a waiting room for the next version. The infinite upgrade chase is fueled by something deeper than marketing. It's built on the human brain's tendency to adapt and want more. Psychologists call it the hedonic treadmill. No matter how much our circumstances improve, our happiness quickly returns to its old baseline. The new car smell fades. The novelty of a luxury trip wears off. The excitement of an upgrade dissolves into the routine of using it. But instead of stepping off the treadmill, we sprint faster, thinking that maybe the next thing will finally be enough. And companies know this. They design upgrades not to complete the experience, but to leave it slightly unfinished, just enough to make you feel the absence of the next step. A missing port, a locked feature, a hint of what's coming next year. They don't just sell the product, they sell the dissatisfaction that will lead you to the next one. In a strange way, this chase keeps us from truly owning anything. Not just physically, but emotionally. We never let ourselves fall in love with what we have, because we know we'll replace it. We don't build deep relationships with our tools, our possessions, or even our own selves, because we're already imagining the upgraded version. And the more we think about the future version, the more the present feels disposable. But here's the quiet truth hidden beneath the noise of release dates and product launches. Satisfaction isn't a feature that can be downloaded. It doesn't arrive in the mail or update overnight. It has to be chosen, deliberately, in defiance of the chase. It means holding on to a device long after it's no longer the newest. It means savoring a moment without thinking of how it could be better. It means asking, not what's next, but what's here. The danger of the infinite upgrade chase isn't just financial, it's existential. If we train ourselves to only value the next version, we risk living our entire lives as a preview. And one day, we may look back and realize we were always waiting, always upgrading, but never arriving, because there will always be a next version, but there will never be another version of this moment. And if we miss it, chasing the next, we'll find ourselves in a future that feels just as incomplete as the present we left behind. Communication breakdown over flow. We once thought more communication meant more understanding, that if we could send messages faster, in more ways, to more people, we'd close the gap between minds. We imagined a world where confusion would disappear, replaced by perfect clarity flowing through perfect channels. But reality has twisted that dream into something else entirely. The more channels we open, the more fractures we create. You send a message, and before it's even read, you're already rephrasing it for another platform. An email here, a text there, a comment on a shared document, a voice note, a quick call, a reply in a group chat. The same thought splintered into fragments, each shaped by the quirks of the medium. And in those fragments, meaning shifts, slightly at first, then drastically. By the time it reaches the other person, it's no longer what you meant. It's what survived the transmission. Every platform has its own rhythm, its own tone, its own set of unspoken rules. A sentence that works in one space sounds cold in another. A delay in response means one thing in a fast-moving chat and another in an email chain. The same emoji can mean reassurance in one context and sarcasm in another. And as we swim between them all, We assume the people on the other end are following the same invisible rulebook we are. They aren't. What we call clarity has been replaced by volume. The flood of messages feels like connection, but most of it is noise, half read, half written, half understood. We think we're covering more ground, but we're just spreading thinner across more surfaces, giving each interaction less of our attention, less of our intention. And because so much is happening at once, we fill in the gaps with assumptions. A message without an exclamation point reads as distant. A delayed reply feels like disinterest. A short sentence sounds angry. We start assigning meaning not from what's said, but from what we expect to see. Expectations that are different for everyone. This is the paradox. More communication channels don't collapse the distance between people. They multiply it. Each medium becomes a translation layer, and every translation carries errors. Even when the words are the same, the context shifts, the weight changes, the intent erodes. Misunderstandings now happen faster than they can be corrected. A single ambiguous sentence can trigger a cascade, copied, screenshotted, forwarded into new spaces where it's read by people who were never meant to see it, stripped of tone, stripped of history. By the time you try to clarify, you're not correcting one misunderstanding. You're battling dozens, all mutating in parallel. It's exhausting. And in that exhaustion, we start pulling away. Not because we have nothing to say, but because the act of saying it feels like navigating a minefield of interpretations. Silence becomes safer than risking another fracture. Ironically, the people we misunderstand most are often the ones we talk to the most. The more we communicate, the more chances there are for small distortions to pile up until they obscure the truth entirely. We think the relationship is growing stronger through constant contact, but in reality, we're building a tower of mismatched meanings that will eventually collapse. The dream was connection. The reality is overflow. Too many voices speaking at once, too many interpretations layered over each other until the original message is buried. And the more tools we invent to fix this, the more complexity we add. The more room there is for something to be lost, twisted, or broken entirely. Maybe the answer isn't more channels. Maybe it's fewer, slower, more deliberate. Maybe understanding isn't built from speed and volume, but from the patience to hold one conversation at a time, fully, without scattering it across a dozen different streams. Because in the end, it doesn't matter how many ways we can reach each other if none of them actually bring us closer. Mirror world illusion. You scroll and it feels like you're looking into the world. Billions of voices, countless moments, a window to reality itself. But it's not a window, it's a mirror. And like all mirrors, it doesn't just reflect, it bends, it warps, it chooses what to show and what to hide. You think you're seeing life as it is, but you're seeing life as it is staged, filtered, and reframed. This is the mirror world illusion. The belief that the digital reflection of reality is the same as reality itself, when in truth, it's a carefully constructed distortion. Online spaces are not neutral. Every post is a selection, every photo a decision, every video an edit. We forget that behind each image is a person who stood in a room, framed the angle, adjusted the lighting, deleted 10 other takes, and chose the one that made them look exactly as they wish to be seen. This is not deceit, it's human nature. We curate. We shape our reflection. But when millions of such curated fragments form the world we consume, the result is an echo of reality so polished and heightened that our minds start confusing it with the truth. Think about how news spreads online. In the physical world, events happen in proportion to their real impact. But in the mirror world, importance is measured by engagement. A small incident, perfectly filmed, can dominate headlines for days, while larger, quieter truths vanish in the shadows. The mirror is not showing you reality. It's showing you what gains attention within its frame. And attention is not the same as truth. This distortion reaches into our sense of identity. You look at other people's lives through their posts, smiling faces, beautiful meals, exotic vacations, and you compare them to your unfiltered moments, the laundry pile, the sleepless nights, the days when nothing happens. You don't realize that you're comparing your raw self to their edited reflection. You begin to feel less, when in truth, you're simply measuring reality against a highlight reel. The mirror world magnifies certain details and erases others, until your sense of what's normal is rewritten entirely. But the most dangerous thing about the mirror world is how it doesn't just reflect life, it begins to rewrite it. Online narratives bleed into offline behavior. Trends born on a screen shape what people wear, how they speak, what they believe. Entire movements, for better or worse, are amplified here until they seem to define reality itself. The distortion loops back into the physical world, altering it to match the image. Reality starts chasing its own reflection. Even our understanding of people becomes skewed. In the physical world, we know someone through time, through patterns of behavior, moments of silence, contradictions, and change. In the mirror world, a person can be reduced to a single post, a single opinion, a single mistake. And once the mirror locks that image, it becomes their identity in the eyes of strangers forever. No room for growth, no context, just a frozen reflection. The illusion hardens, and reality is forgotten. Algorithms sharpen the distortion further. They don't simply hold up a mirror, they tilt it towards whatever keeps you staring longest. If outrage holds your gaze, the mirror will show you more outrage. If beauty holds your gaze, it will flood you with beauty until reality seems dull by comparison. The mirror learns your weaknesses and feeds them back to you, creating a version of the world where your beliefs are reinforced, your desires exaggerated, and your fears magnified. And yet, we return to it every day, because the mirror world is addictive. It offers clarity in a way reality doesn't. It has neat categories, instant judgments, and easy conclusions. The mess of real life is reduced to scrollable certainty, but this certainty is the greatest illusion of all. The truth is always messier, harder to capture, and often invisible to the lens. The danger is not just personal, it's collective. When societies begin to see the mirror world as the real one, they start making decisions based on its distortions. Elections swing on viral moments instead of policy. Cultures fracture over amplified outrage instead of nuanced dialogue. The reflection becomes more important than the substance. The image matters more than the thing itself. Escaping the illusion doesn't mean abandoning the digital space. It means remembering what it is. A mirror is useful. It can help us see angles of ourselves and the world we might miss otherwise. But no one mistakes their reflection for their body. You glance at the mirror, then turn back to reality to live. The danger comes when you forget to look away, when you begin to believe that the glass holds the whole truth. So the next time you scroll through the endless stream, pause. Ask yourself, is this reality or is this the reflection of someone else's framing? Whose hand is holding the mirror? What lies beyond its edges? And most importantly, what might I be missing while staring into the glass? Because the real world is not always as polished, not always as dramatic, and not always as visible. But it is where life is actually happening. And no mirror, no matter how clear, can ever replace the depth of being there. Meaning fragmentation paradox. It begins as a promise. The more we know, the closer we'll get to truth. The more perspectives we gather, the more complete the picture will become. For centuries, scarcity was the problem. Books locked behind walls, knowledge hoarded by the few. Stories passed through narrow channels where they could be altered, lost, or silenced. When the gates opened and the flood came, we believed we were stepping into an age where meaning itself would finally sharpen, crystallize, become undeniable. But the flood didn't just bring clarity, it brought everything. Facts, lies, jokes, theories, context ripped from their frames, evidence and counter-evidence arriving in the same breath. An ocean without shore, where every truth floats alongside its reflection and both shimmer with equal conviction. In the beginning, you try to navigate it. You dive deeper, thinking that the answer must be just beyond the next link, the next video, the next thread. You collect more, compare more, cross-reference until your eyes ache. But instead of solid ground, you find the floor dropping out beneath you. The very act of gathering more begins to loosen your grip on what you thought you knew. It's not that the information is wrong, though much of it is. It's that it refuses to settle. Every claim has a counterclaim. Every proof has a flaw. Every angle has another angle beneath it. In this constant collision, meaning begins to fracture. A single event becomes not a story, but 1,000 parallel interpretations, each supported by its own swarm of facts, each demanding belief. You start to realize that abundance doesn't always deepen understanding. It dilutes it. Meaning becomes something you have to assemble yourself from scattered, mismatched pieces. And the pieces don't quite fit. The more you try to force them together, the more the seams show. The human mind wasn't built for this kind of saturation. We evolved to make sense of the world with limited input, to draw clear lines from incomplete data. Faced with too much, we don't become more certain. We become more selective. We start choosing the pieces that feel comfortable, the ones that affirm what we already believe, ignoring the rest. And in doing so, we create smaller and smaller worlds inside a boundless one. The paradox is this: the closer we get to having all the information, the further we drift from a shared meaning of it. The abundance that should unite us instead splinters us into islands, each convinced of its own complete picture. And because the pieces we've chosen fit so perfectly in our own frame, it becomes harder to imagine how anyone could see it differently. Over time, even the pursuit of truth changes. It stops being about finding what is real and becomes about defending the meaning you've already built from the pieces you trust. And with every person doing the same, reality itself becomes less of a singular thing and more of a contested territory, one where meaning is not discovered but manufactured endlessly from the infinite material at hand. If there's a way through the meaning fragmentation paradox, it isn't in gathering more pieces. It's in remembering that meaning isn't just about what fits. It's about what connects. It's about learning to see the frame as clearly as the picture, to notice the hands that selected the pieces, including your own. Without that awareness, the flood will keep rising, and the more we know, the less we'll agree on what it means. And in that future, the tragedy won't be ignorance. It will be the fact that we drowned in the very abundance we thought would save us. Darkness of transparency. We've been told that transparency is the ultimate cure for mistrust, that the more light you shine, the fewer shadows there are for suspicion to hide in. Governments promise it, corporations advertise it, relationships strive for it. Nothing to hide has become a moral badge, as if secrecy itself is a crime. But here's the paradox. Too much transparency doesn't strengthen trust. It corrodes it. At first, openness feels pure. We see behind the curtain and believe we are closer to the truth. But the more we see, the more we notice. The flaws, the contradictions, the compromises. When every decision, every motive, every passing thought is laid bare, the illusion of simplicity shatters. People forget that trust often thrives not on knowing everything, but on believing enough. Consider a friendship. In a healthy one, you don't demand to know every fleeting doubt, every irritation, every hidden insecurity. The trust exists in the spaces you don't inspect, but force complete exposure, and you turn those private moments into evidence, scrutinized, misinterpreted, replayed. The more someone tells you, the more you begin to wonder what they aren't telling you. And even if they reveal everything, you begin to notice the tone of their voice, the pauses, the micro-expressions. You start reading suspicion into silence itself. In politics, full transparency was meant to keep leaders honest. But in practice, it often traps them in performance. Every word is chosen for optics. Every action calibrated for how it will play in headlines. The result? Less authenticity, not more. Decisions are made for show, not for effectiveness, because the constant gaze punishes complexity and rewards simplicity, even when reality is anything but simple. In relationships, the demand for radical transparency often masks insecurity. Tell me everything quickly becomes, prove to me, constantly, that you're not hiding anything. The very act of overexposing can breed paranoia. It replaces faith with surveillance, trust with monitoring. Love becomes less about connection and more about constant confirmation. The darkness of transparency lies in its ability to flip the human mind against itself. Once you're given access to the inner workings of anything, a person, a company, a system, you start expecting that access to be complete. If a single window is shuttered, you assume it hides something damning. And because no life, no system, no person is perfectly consistent, the more you see, the more inconsistencies you'll find. Those inconsistencies might be harmless, an unspoken preference, an unflattering truth, a half-forgotten promise. But transparency turns them into cracks in the foundation. The more cracks you see, the less solid the structure feels, until you no longer trust it to stand. In this way, transparency becomes self-destructive. Its purpose is to reassure, but its effect is often to amplify doubt. It replaces the warm weight of trust, a trust built on shared history, mutual understanding, and unspoken boundaries, with the cold, exhausting need for proof. proof that must be renewed endlessly, because once someone is used to seeing everything, they grow uneasy in the dark. And perhaps the most dangerous part is this: excessive transparency doesn't just erode trust between people, it erodes trust in our own instincts. We stop believing in our ability to feel whether someone is honest, to sense their intentions, to judge their character over time. Instead, we become addicted to data, to receipts, to surveillance, as though trust were a calculation rather than a living, breathing thing. The irony is that the deepest trust isn't built in the floodlights. It's built in the shadows, where you choose to believe without demanding to see, where the absence of proof doesn't feel like danger, but like safety, where mystery isn't a threat, but a sign that you've given someone the freedom to be more than the sum of what you can monitor. Too much light can blind. Too much exposure can burn. And when we forget that, when we insist on turning over every stone, we may find ourselves not enlightened, but lost, staring at a million scattered pieces of truth, unable to hold them together, unable to remember the shape of trust before we tore it apart. Growth stagnation trap. We are taught from the earliest moments of life that growth is the proof of living. Bigger, better, faster. These are the milestones we celebrate. A company is praised when its profits climb, a city when its skyline rises higher, a person when their achievements outnumber last year's. Growth becomes not just a goal, but an identity. Yet hidden in this obsession is a quiet and dangerous paradox. The more we force growth without pause, the more we risk killing the very conditions that allow it to exist. This is the growth stagnation trap. In nature, growth is never infinite. A tree does not stretch into the sky forever. It grows to a point, then shifts its energy inward, strengthening its roots, thickening its trunk, expanding its resilience. In human systems, we often forget this. Businesses set targets that demand constant upward curves. Economies are expected to expand endlessly. Individuals measure their worth by relentless self-improvement. But when growth is pursued for its own sake, without regard for sustainability or purpose, it begins to feed on itself, draining the resources that once fueled it. Consider a company that chases expansion above all else. At first, growth means new opportunities, more staff, more customers, more reach. But over time, the pressure to keep growing can push it toward cutting corners, overextending resources, or ignoring the quality that made it successful in the first place. In trying to grow forever, it sacrifices the very foundation it stands on. Eventually, the pace becomes unsustainable, innovation slows, and the growth curve flattens, not because the potential is gone, but because the system has exhausted itself. The same trap appears in personal life. Self-development can be powerful, learning new skills, taking on challenges, building better habits. But when every moment is consumed with more, the act of living becomes a checklist. Rest is seen as laziness. Enjoyment is treated as distraction. You begin to chase progress not out of curiosity or passion, but out of fear of standing still. And in that constant forward motion, you lose the time to integrate what you've learned, to let experiences shape you deeply. Without those pauses, growth becomes shallow, a stack of achievements with nothing holding them together. On a societal scale, the growth stagnation trap takes on an even more dangerous form. Economies built on perpetual expansion eventually face the limits of the planet itself. Resources deplete, ecosystems collapse, inequality widens. Yet leaders still promise more, as if it's the only definition of success. True progress, improving quality of life, preserving the environment, creating stability, gets sidelined because it doesn't fit neatly into the quarterly growth metric. We measure movement, not meaning. What makes this trap so insidious is that it feels like the opposite of stagnation, at least at first. You're busy, you're producing, the numbers are climbing. But under the surface, cracks are forming. Innovation gives way to repetition. Exploration is replaced with exploitation. The more you cling to constant expansion, the more fragile the system becomes, because it has no time to repair, adapt, or regenerate. In biology, there's a term for this: overgrowth. When cells multiply without limit, they become cancerous, harming the organism they inhabit. In human endeavors, unchecked growth can do the same. It turns vitality into strain, abundance into scarcity. The irony is that real, lasting growth requires moments of stillness, times to reflect, recalibrate, and redirect. Without those moments, the engine burns out. Breaking free from the growth stagnation trap means redefining what progress looks like. It's shifting from endless expansion to cyclical growth, like seasons that bloom, rest, and bloom again. It means asking whether the next step adds real value or just adds volume. It means recognizing that sometimes the wisest move is not forward, but inward. The truth is, growth without purpose is just motion, and motion without reflection is the slowest path to true progress. If we can learn to value depth as much as scale, stability as much as speed, we may find that what we thought was stagnation is actually the soil preparing for the next real transformation. Because in the end, relentless growth is not the sign of life. It is the refusal to let life breathe. And only when we let it breathe can it truly flourish. Pleasure-pain spiral. It begins with a simple impulse, to feel good, to chase warmth over cold, ease over strain, joy over emptiness. The instinct is so natural it feels unquestionable. You eat because the taste is good. You scroll because the distraction feels good. You buy because the newness feels good. Every step is a small turn toward pleasure and away from discomfort. At first, it works. The moment you taste it, you feel the rush of reward. The brain lights up, the body relaxes, the mind quiets. You tell yourself you'll stop here, that you'll take just enough to keep the balance. But pleasure never stays still. What was enough yesterday feels weaker today. The mind remembers the height of the first time and wants to touch it again, so you push a little further. One more bite, one more episode, one more hour. The climb toward pleasure becomes a pattern, and without realizing it, you've started building a spiral. The thing that was once a gift begins to require maintenance. You need more of it just to feel normal. You need stronger doses to reach the same high. And slowly, almost invisibly, pleasure begins to flip its face. The sweetness dulls, the novelty fades, but you keep chasing because you remember how it used to feel. That memory becomes the bait that keeps you running forward, even as the reward shrinks and the cost grows. What you don't notice at first is that the spiral is tightening. Each turn demands more time, more energy, more of yourself. And somewhere along the way, the pain you were trying to avoid begins to seep back in. But now, it's tangled with the very thing you thought would protect you. The food you reached for in comfort becomes the weight you carry in shame. The drink that once took the edge off now sharpens it. The affection you craved turns into dependency, and the entertainment you used to enjoy becomes a numbing blur you can't pull away from. This is the pleasure-pain spiral, the point where the pursuit of joy breeds the same suffering you were running from. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's a slow erosion, days blurring into nights, weeks disappearing into habits you didn't consciously choose. Sometimes it's sharp, an instant of clarity when you realize you're no longer chasing pleasure at all, but avoiding the pain of its absence. We rarely see the spiral while we're inside it, because every step feels logical in isolation. Just this once feels harmless. I deserve this feels fair. But the spiral doesn't measure in single steps. It measures in the way they compound. One small indulgence becomes a dependency, and dependency is a fragile thing. It breaks the moment the source is taken away. The cruelest twist is that breaking the spiral hurts. The body protests, the mind rebels, every part of you screams to go back to the comfort you've built around yourself. But going back only tightens the loop, feeding the very cycle that's hollowing you out. The only way out is to face the discomfort you were trying to avoid in the first place, to sit in the boredom, the hunger, the loneliness, the restlessness, without immediately smothering it with pleasure. And in that raw space, you find something strange. The pain isn't constant. It rises, it peaks, it fades. And when it fades, what's left isn't pleasure, but a quiet that feels more real than the chase ever did. The spiral never truly disappears. The pull toward it remains, waiting for the moment you forget how easily it can close around you. But if you've seen it clearly, you can step carefully, choosing pleasure without being consumed by it, and accepting pain without being defined by it. Because the truth is, pleasure was never the opposite of pain. In excess, they are the same thing, just different turns on the same spiral. Truth erosion. Phenomenon. We live in an age obsessed with answers. Every mystery must be solved, every gap filled, every unknown made knowable. We demand transparency from our leaders, instant fact-checking for every claim, complete clarity in every field. It sounds noble, even necessary, but here's the paradox. The more truth we demand, the more falsehoods flood in to meet that demand. The hunger for certainty becomes a weakness, and into that weakness pours noise, distortion, and carefully crafted lies. This is the truth erosion phenomenon, the slow wearing away of reality under the weight of our own insistence on knowing. The human mind hates a vacuum. If you leave a question unanswered, the discomfort grows. In the past, mystery lingered because the channels of information were slow. Rumors traveled at the speed of conversation. Today, silence is unacceptable. The moment a question forms, someone, somewhere, will rush to answer it, whether they know the truth or not. And in the race to fill that silence, accuracy is sacrificed for immediacy. The result? The space where truth should be becomes flooded with speculation dressed as fact. Think about breaking news. An event happens, and within minutes, headlines appear, often conflicting, each claiming authority. Social media amplifies them, pushing the most emotional or extreme interpretations to the top. Hours later, the official facts emerge, but by then, the false versions have already been shared millions of times, burned into memory. The truth comes too late, arriving like a faint whisper after the room has been filled with shouting. This isn't just about speed, it's about appetite. The more we want to know, the more we expect reality to provide a constant stream of revelations. But reality doesn't work like that. Some truths take time to uncover. Some are complex, layered, and resistant to simplification. In the absence of patience, something else steps in: fabrication. People fill the gap with what they think should be true, what they want to be true, or what benefits them if others believe it's true. And once those fictions spread, they don't just compete with truth, they erode it. We can see it in science too. When research doesn't produce a quick, satisfying answer, alternative narratives bloom. Conspiracy theories, pseudoscience, and manipulative explainers flood the space, preying on our need for closure. The internet rewards the appearance of knowledge more than knowledge itself. Confidence outperforms evidence. The louder the claim, the more attention it gets, even if it's hollow at its core. The truth erosion phenomenon also thrives in politics. The more citizens demand transparency, the more those in power learn to weaponize information, not by hiding it completely, but by overloading the public with conflicting versions of it. When people are given too many truths at once, each contradicting the other, the mind begins to doubt that truth exists at all. Confusion becomes a shield. In this fog, those who manipulate narratives hold the advantage, because a bewildered public is easier to control than an informed one. It's important to understand that erosion is different from destruction. Destruction is quick. You can see it happen. Erosion is slow, almost invisible. Grain by grain, the solid ground of shared reality wears away, until one day we find ourselves standing on shifting sand. We no longer argue over what is right or wrong. We argue over what is real. And when that foundation cracks, every debate becomes meaningless because there is no longer a common truth to return to. There's a psychological cost too. Living in a world of eroded truth breeds cynicism. We start believing that everyone is lying, that every claim has an agenda, that seeking truth is pointless. This cynicism feels like wisdom, but it's a trap. It leaves us vulnerable to the next voice that offers certainty, no matter how false. The promise of finally knowing becomes seductive, and so the cycle repeats. Demand truth, receive lies, lose trust, seek new truth, receive more lies. The tragedy is that the phenomenon feeds on good intentions. Wanting to know more is not wrong, it's deeply human. But when our thirst for answers becomes an unquenchable demand for immediacy, we create a marketplace where speed and spectacle crush depth and verification. The market responds to what we reward, and right now, we reward being first, not being correct. To resist the truth erosion phenomenon, we have to relearn the discipline of uncertainty, to accept that some answers must be earned over time. That silence is sometimes better than noise. That "I don't know yet" is a more honest statement than any half-truth designed to fill the gap. This is hard in a culture that treats hesitation as weakness, but without it, the erosion will continue until there's nothing left to stand on. And maybe that's the final warning. Truth doesn't vanish all at once. It fades. Not because it is defeated in open battle, but because it is quietly crowded out by the swarm of falsehoods we've invited in. If we truly care about protecting it, We must be willing to let the space between question and answer breathe, even if it's uncomfortable, because in that space, patience keeps the door open for reality to arrive. And when it does, it will not shout. It will speak softly, but it will be real. Echo chamber expansion. At first, it feels like a miracle. The network is vast, limitless, a web that stretches across the world, connecting you to more voices than any human in history could have imagined hearing in a lifetime. Every idea, every perspective, every fragment of knowledge is just a click away. You can follow strangers on the other side of the planet, listen to experts you'd never meet, watch cultures you've never stepped into unfold in real time. It should be impossible to feel alone here. It should be impossible not to grow. And yet, something begins to happen. Slowly, quietly, almost invisibly. The more you connect, the more your world begins to shrink. Not in size, but in shape. The ideas you see most often start to look familiar. They carry the same rhythms, the same values, the same conclusions. They speak your language, not just literally, but ideologically. And the ones that don't fit, they fade, not with a sharp cut, but with a slow dimming until you almost forget they exist. It doesn't feel like censorship. It feels like efficiency. You're shown more of what you like, less of what you don't. The people you follow echo your sense of humor, your beliefs, your outrage. Their words make you nod in recognition, make you feel seen, make you feel, most dangerously, right. Over time, you begin to mistake this constant affirmation for balance, for truth, for the whole picture. You tell yourself your network is diverse. After all, it's huge. Thousands of connections, millions of potential voices. But variety isn't about numbers, it's about difference. And difference is exactly what begins to vanish. The algorithms feeding you information don't care about the breadth of the network. They care about engagement. They care about keeping you inside, and what keeps you inside is comfort, familiarity, the reassuring rhythm of ideas you already half believe before you even hear them. So, the vast network doesn't sprawl outward, it folds inward. Like a massive city where every street eventually loops back to the same central square. You can walk for hours and feel like you've traveled far, only to end up in front of the same voices, the same thoughts, the same safe and predictable worldview. And the irony is that the bigger the network gets, the stronger the illusion of variety becomes. With so many people, so many posts, so much noise, it feels impossible that you could be hearing the same things over and over. But that's the brilliance of the echo chamber. It doesn't mute the noise, it multiplies it. The same ideas bounce through 1,000 mouths, wearing 1,000 different faces, until it feels like consensus. And consensus feels like truth. The danger is subtle. You don't just stop hearing different ideas, you stop being able to imagine them. The range of thought you see every day becomes the limit of what you believe exists, and when a truly foreign perspective breaks through, it doesn't feel like just another possibility. It feels wrong, absurd, threatening. The chamber doesn't just protect your ideas from challenge, it protects them from the very concept of challenge. You can see it happening everywhere. People with vast global networks living inside tiny intellectual rooms. Entire communities convinced that they are surrounded by diversity, while in reality, they are surrounded by reflections. And the walls don't feel like walls because they were transparent, made of the very connections you thought were doors. The echo chamber expansion is the paradox of scale. The more we grow our networks, the more we risk collapsing our worlds. The antidote isn't more connections, it's intentional friction. It's the discomfort of listening to people who do not speak your language of certainty, who will not nod back at you, who force you to stand on ground that doesn't match the contours of your own mind. Without that, the network's size becomes meaningless. We could wire every human together and still end up with billions of isolated circles, each convinced they are the center of the map. And in that reality, the tragedy won't be that we lacked the means to hear each other. It will be that we built the perfect machine to make sure we didn't. Instant gratification delay. You tap the screen and feel the tiny spark of reward. A like, a message, a new thing arriving tomorrow. Your pulse answers before your mind does. You have trained it well. We all have. Faster is always better, we whisper to ourselves. Faster answers, faster delivery, faster wins. We built a world that runs on the thrill of immediacy and then wondered why the deep parts of us feel oddly delayed, as if the soul is still buffering even after the page is loaded. The promise of instant gratification is that it saves time. But saved time is not the same as fulfilled time. We compress the path until there is barely a path at all, and then stare, unsatisfied, at the destination we teleported to. It looks correct, but it doesn't land. We got here with no friction, and friction was the file that would have sharpened desire. Without it, wanting becomes shallow and short-lived, and the thing we wanted dissolves in our hands like sponge sugar in water. Think about how you listen to music now. 30 seconds into a song, your finger twitches towards skip. Somewhere a chorus you haven't earned is waiting, so you hunt it. You don't live with the verse long enough for it to change you, to prepare your body for the drop. Or books. You skim summaries, quotes, recycled insight, and then wonder why nothing stays. The mind remembers the path it had to carve. It forgets the hallway it merely passed through. We buy with one click and feel a surge of certainty. The package arrives and the surge fades before the box is open. We match with strangers in an endless deck, each face a promise with a fast-forward button. In conversation, we rush to the headline of our point and never let the quiet gather enough weight to carry meaning. We microwave every ritual we inherited from slower ancestors and then complain that life tastes underseasoned. Speed is a miracle in the right places. No one wants a slow ambulance or a slow apology. But when we apply speed to meaning itself, we start to distort it. A relationship hurried into existence becomes a negotiation of dopamine schedules. A career chosen for immediate applause becomes a prison whose bars are made of expectations we accepted in a hurry. Even spirituality gets optimized, meditation gamified, stillness measured, transcendence pushed as a productivity hack. The heart cannot be sprinted into depth. It needs corridors of time to echo. The paradox is cruel and simple. The more aggressively we chase quick hits of pleasure, the longer fulfillment takes to arrive, if it arrives at all. Our reward circuits, trained like impatient dogs, yank us down side streets and keep us from the long road where meaning actually lives. You feel it when you scroll late at night, each tiny glow promising sleep soon, peace soon, satisfaction soon. The more you chase it, the more the moment recedes, like a shoreline you swim toward that keeps sliding away. Consider the craftsman who shapes a table by hand. The hours plane him as much as he planes the wood. The table carries a density that cannot be rushed, tiny decisions layered into grain, a patient conversation between tool, fiber, and hand. Now, imagine the flat-packed version delivered within hours. It functions. It does not satisfy. Your body knows. It knows the difference between contact and content. Or think of the letter you once had to wait for. The waiting was not empty. It was a kiln. Anticipation fired the words into permanence, and when the envelope finally opened, the meaning arrived glowing. Today the message pings before your longing can form, and then it evaporates in the same instant, replaced by the next and the next. You are left rich in signals and poor in significance. We mistake stimulation for nourishment. They feel similar at first, the way salt can masquerade as substance. But stimulation stacks without ending. Nourishment completes. Stimulation is a click. Nourishment is a chorus you lived through, a page you didn't skim, a mile you had to breathe to finish. The body keeps private ledgers. It knows which experiences built you and which merely visited your receptors and left. We also confuse velocity with freedom. Faster seems freer because it multiplies options, but options without commitment create a paralysis that freezes the deeper self. To choose nothing fully is to be owned by everything lightly. Depth requires saying no to most of what is available. It requires the audacity to be slow on purpose while the world sprints past you, laughing. So, how do you step out of the loop? Not by abandoning speed, but by giving it boundaries. Use the fast lane for transactions and the slow lane for transformations. Order groceries quickly if you must, but make a meal slowly and eat it without a second screen nearby. Let your playlists play past the reflex to skip. Read long things in long sittings. Let your friendships marinate in time, with unoptimized hours where nothing happens. Replace the question, how can I get this now, with, what would make this worth the wait? Build staggered returns into your life. Delay the unboxing. Let anticipation grow until it has something to carry. Practice finishing what you start even when the early fizz dies. Protect the long, boring middle where mastery accumulates grain by grain. Schedule days that are unmeasured by output, guarded from the hum of constant partial attention. The point is not austerity. It is alignment, making your time rhyme with your values. And when you feel the itch to speed everything up, notice what it is you're trying not to feel. The itch is often a small grief, a room in the self that is quiet and unswept. We race to avoid it, and in racing, stretch the avoidance across years. Sit there instead. Let the room speak. Slowness is not empty. It is detailed. It reveals the fine print of your life. Remember the first time you learned something truly difficult, an instrument, a language, a discipline that refused to bend to your tempo. The breakthroughs came on their own schedule. You could not bribe or bully them, and when they finally arrived, they rewired you. Quick pleasures give you flashes. Real learning gives you form. What is fulfillment if not the shape you take after long fidelity to something that mattered? In the end, genuine fulfillment is not delayed by slowness, but by shortcuts. We kept pressing fast forward and discovered we could no longer hear the song. We tried to live on previews and forgot how to watch a thing all the way through. We reached for 100 little joys and lost the strength to carry one great one. The cure is humiliating and human. Fewer taps, longer breaths, smaller circles, deeper roots. Let the world keep its race. Learn the weight of your own pace. Let reward be a consequence again, not a stimulus. Choose rituals that take time and pay you back in identity. Become someone who has patience the way others have followers. And when the moment comes, and it will, when you feel that old reflex tug your hand toward the shortcut, smile gently at it and walk the long way home. Control loss through control. We are taught that control is safety, that if we can anticipate every variable, manage every risk, and direct every outcome, we can bend life into something predictable and secure. We plan our schedules down to the minute, lock our doors, track our steps, monitor our sleep, analyze our habits, and try to hold the steering wheel of reality with both hands. At first, this feels empowering, but over time, a strange reversal occurs. The more control we try to seize, the less we seem to actually have. This is the paradox of control loss through control. It begins subtly. You create routines to make life efficient, only to feel anxious when something disrupts them. You set rules to keep yourself disciplined, but they start to feel like a prison. You hold tightly to relationships so they won't fall apart, only to watch them crack under the pressure. In seeking absolute control, you create fragility. Like a glass figurine, your system becomes flawless in shape but shatters at the slightest impact. The irony is that life's unpredictability is not a flaw, it's its defining feature. No matter how meticulously you arrange the pieces, there are forces beyond your reach. The sudden illness, the unexpected opportunity, the shift in someone else's heart. Control promises certainty, but certainty is an illusion. And the more you invest in the illusion, the more destabilizing it becomes when reality breaks through. You can see this in personal behavior. Someone obsessed with controlling their diet may become trapped in cycles of guilt and restriction, where one unplanned meal feels like failure. An executive who micromanages every decision may slow the entire company, creating chaos when they are absent. A parent who tries to control every aspect of a child's life may raise someone who is unprepared for the unpredictability of the real world. In each case, the very control that was meant to protect ends up eroding the stability it aimed to preserve. On a larger scale, societies do this too. Governments that seek total control over their citizens often end up provoking unrest, rebellion, or collapse. The tighter the grip, the more people push back. The more a system tries to eliminate uncertainty, the more brittle it becomes when change inevitably arrives. History is filled with empires that built elaborate mechanisms to maintain order, only to fall apart faster because they could not adapt. Psychologists sometimes call this the control paradox. True influence over your life doesn't come from dominating every detail. It comes from knowing which details you can let go of. When you try to control what is uncontrollable, you not only fail, but you also waste the energy you could have used to adapt. And when adaptation becomes impossible, real control slips away. It's like trying to grip water in your hands. The harder you squeeze, the faster it escapes. Control, in this sense, is not about holding tight. It's about shaping your hands so that the water can rest there without forcing it. Real control is fluid, not rigid. It moves with the current rather than against it. Technology has amplified this paradox. We can track our every heartbeat, movement, and expenditure. Yet these tools can create dependence instead of mastery. The moment the tracking stops, we feel lost, as though without the data, we have no control at all. We give away our autonomy to the very systems we built to strengthen it, breaking free from the control loss. Through control cycle means redefining what control is. It's not about removing uncertainty, it's about increasing your capacity to face it. It's about building resilience instead of rigidity, trust instead of surveillance. It means making peace with the fact that some doors will always be locked, some storms will always arrive without warning, and some outcomes will always belong to chance. When you stop trying to force the world into a shape it will never hold, you begin to discover a deeper kind of control, the kind that doesn't vanish when the plan changes, the kind that survives disruption. Because in the end, the attempt to control everything is the fastest way to lose everything. But the willingness to adapt, to bend, to let go, that is the one control you can never lose. Perfection, imperfection trap. It always starts with the best of intentions. You want to improve, to refine, to make something as flawless as it can possibly be. The drive for perfection feels like a noble pursuit, proof that you care enough to get it right. You look closely. You fix small flaws, you polish the rough edges, and at first, the progress feels good. But somewhere along the way, something shifts. The closer you get to perfect, the more you see what's missing. Your eye sharpens, but not in the way you hoped. Instead of seeing the beauty of what you've built, you start seeing everything it isn't. Every detail that doesn't align exactly with your vision begins to stand out, glowing like a crack under a black light. You tell yourself this is just part of the process, that noticing imperfections means you're getting better. But the truth is, you're training your mind to see flaws first, and everything else second. The more you polish, the more microscopic your judgment becomes, until even the smallest deviation feels unbearable. It doesn't stop with your work. You start noticing it in people, in yourself, in life. The more you demand perfection in one area, the more intolerable imperfection becomes everywhere else. The human face becomes a collection of asymmetries. A conversation becomes a list of awkward pauses. A day becomes a tally of all the moments that didn't go exactly as planned. This is the perfection-imperfection trap. The closer you try to get to flawless, the more every tiny flaw begins to feel like failure. You start believing that the only acceptable outcome is absolute precision, and that anything less is proof you didn't try hard enough. What once motivated you now paralyzes you. You delay finishing projects because they're never quite ready. You avoid starting new ones because you already see the ways they could go wrong. You stop enjoying the things you once loved because you can't unsee the imperfections. And in the cruelest twist, the trap deepens the better you get. As your skill improves, so does your ability to detect flaws that no one else would notice. What a beginner would celebrate as a triumph, you discard as not good enough. Your own growth becomes invisible to you because the target keeps moving. Perfection recedes like a mirage, always just out of reach. The pursuit stops being about making something beautiful and starts being about avoiding anything you can't criticize. And that avoidance breeds fear. Fear of being judged. Fear of being seen before you've had the chance to fix every possible flaw. So you hide your work. You hide yourself. You become the gatekeeper of a prison you built in the name of excellence. The only way out is to accept something that feels almost like betrayal. Perfection doesn't exist, and chasing it will make you blind to everything that's already good. You have to decide that beauty can live alongside imperfection, that sometimes the cracks are what make something worth looking at. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop letting perfection be the only measure of worth. You learn to step back and see the whole picture instead of zooming in until the flaws are all you can see. You remember that the point was never to make something that could not be criticized, but to make something that could be loved, even if it's not flawless. Because if you don't, the trap closes completely, and all you're left with is a life where nothing is ever enough. Not because it isn't, but because you've trained yourself to believe it can't be. Surveillance, safety illusion. They tell you it's for your protection. Cameras on every corner, data logs of every call, algorithms scanning every movement. You're assured it's all to keep you safe, to prevent danger before it reaches you. And at first, it feels comforting, like someone is always watching over you. But then the comfort shifts. The watching never stops. The presence never fades. You start to wonder, if safety requires constant surveillance, are you really safe or just constantly reminded of danger? This is the surveillance safety illusion, the belief that more watching means more security, when in truth, it often breeds more fear. Surveillance thrives on the promise of prevention. If someone is always monitoring, the reasoning goes, crimes can be stopped before they happen. And sometimes it works. Stolen property is recovered. Suspects are caught. Emergencies are responded to faster. But what's less visible is the subtle shift that happens in the mind of the watched. Every camera, every sensor, every digital trace is a reminder that danger is not only possible, but expected. The very tools meant to create peace of mind begin to feed a constant undercurrent of unease. It's not just about the physical eye, it's the psychological one. The knowledge that someone somewhere is recording every move alters how people behave. You hesitate in ways you never did before. You censor words in a private message, not because they're wrong, but because you imagine how they might look out of context. You avoid certain places not because they're unsafe, but because you don't want to be flagged by a system you don't control. Safety becomes less about freedom from danger and more about obedience to the watcher. There's also a hidden paradox. The more surveillance we have, the more anomalies we detect. Every unusual action, every deviation from a norm gets flagged. Suddenly, harmless behaviors become potential threats in the eyes of an algorithm. A person running to catch a bus might look like someone fleeing a crime scene. A group gathering for fun might be labeled as suspicious activity. Each alert, each false alarm reinforces the idea that danger is everywhere, because the system is always finding it. Over time, the culture shifts. Streets lined with cameras no longer signal safety. They signal that you are in a place where bad things are expected to happen. People begin to live in a heightened state of vigilance, not because the world has grown more dangerous, but because surveillance keeps reminding them it might be. Fear becomes the default background noise of daily life. History offers countless warnings. Societies with total surveillance often use it not just to watch criminals, but to shape behavior, suppress dissent, and control thought. When safety becomes the justification for limitless monitoring, danger can be redefined at will. The same camera that watches for theft can watch for protest. The same database that tracks threats can track beliefs. Safety becomes a story told to keep the watchers in place, while fear becomes the currency that sustains them. Even in free societies, surveillance can alter the collective psyche. Children grow up knowing they are always visible. Workers perform under constant evaluation. Citizens learn to live as though every moment is an audition for an unseen judge. And in this endless performance, authentic behavior erodes. We stop acting from who we are and start acting from who the system wants us to be. Safety becomes a performance, not a reality. The surveillance safety illusion works because it leverages a deep human instinct, the desire for protection. It tells us that vigilance equals safety, that more eyes mean fewer threats. But the truth is more complicated. Watching does not eliminate danger. It only shifts its shape. And in some cases, it multiplies fear until the fear itself becomes the danger. Because a society living in constant watchfulness is a society living in constant anxiety. And anxious societies make decisions they would never make in calm reflection. The irony is that real safety often feels invisible. You know it when you walk through a neighborhood and feel at ease, not because there are cameras on every pole, but because there's trust, stability, and shared responsibility. That kind of safety can't be manufactured by observation alone. It's built through relationships, justice, and resilience. Surveillance can record what happens, but it cannot replace the human bonds that prevent danger in the first place. So, the next time someone promises safety through more surveillance, ask yourself, is this really about protection or about control? Will these eyes watch over me, or will they watch me into submission? Because if the price of safety is to live in a state of constant alert, always aware of being seen, then safety stops feeling like freedom and starts feeling like a cage with the lights always on. Gamification fatigue. It starts innocently enough. The game is meant to make things better, more engaging, more motivating, more fun. Points for progress, badges for milestones, levels to climb, challenges to keep you coming back. At first, it works. You feel the spark, the small hit of satisfaction each time you cross a line, unlock a reward, see your name rise on the leaderboard. Ordinary tasks take on the shimmer of play. And for a while you believe the shimmer is joy. You believe the system has found a way to hack your own motivation, to make you want the things you should want anyway. Exercise, learning, saving money, building habits. The numbers go up, and with them, so does your sense of accomplishment. But then something changes. Slowly, quietly, so that you don't even notice at first. The game stops being an addition to the experience and becomes the experience itself. You no longer run because the air feels sharp in your lungs. You run because you need to hit your step goal. You no longer read because a sentence caught your attention. You read to maintain a streak. You no longer cook because you love the smell of garlic and onions sizzling. You cook because it earns you points towards some arbitrary digital badge. The activity is still there, but the meaning has shifted. It's not about the thing. It's about the metric. And as the metric grows in importance, the original joy begins to thin out. What once felt like freedom starts to feel like obligation. You can't simply stop playing because stopping means losing progress, missing a day, breaking a streak, falling behind. Soon, the game that was supposed to make life lighter becomes another weight to carry. You check your stats before you check your mood. You feel guilty on days you don't score well enough. You stop asking yourself if you even like the thing you're doing. You just keep doing it because the numbers say you should. And here's the part no one talks about. Rewards decay. The same points, the same badges, the same leaderboards that once lit you up eventually become background noise. The human mind adapts. What thrilled you yesterday feels empty today. To keep you hooked, the system has to keep escalating. More challenges, more rewards, more pressure, and every escalation chips away at the very joy it's trying to simulate. Until one day, you wake up and realize you don't want to play anymore. Not because the rewards aren't big enough, but because the game has replaced the thing you loved. The runs, the books, the meals, the conversations, they've all been filtered through a system that made them measurable, but not meaningful. This is gamification fatigue, when the constant pursuit of points and progress strips away the original reason you cared. It's the quiet erosion of intrinsic motivation under the weight of constant scoring. And once it sets in, even stopping the game doesn't immediately bring the joy back. You have to relearn how to do things for their own sake, without expecting them to level you up. The tragedy is that the game was never the problem. It was the belief that the game could replace the thing it was built around. Points can motivate, but they can't nourish. Badges can recognize, but they can't fulfill. Levels can challenge, but they can't love the climb for you. And if we forget that, we risk turning life itself into one long game we eventually burn out on, leaving us with high scores and empty hearts. Legacy, oblivion effect. We spend our lives building something that will outlast us, a body of work. A name, a reputation, a story we believe the world will keep telling long after we're gone. We call it legacy. It's our antidote to mortality, the proof that we mattered. And yet, the more desperately we try to preserve it, the faster it slips through our fingers. The act of guarding it can accelerate its decay. At first, the pursuit seems noble. You work harder. You carve your name into stone, literally or figuratively. You record every achievement, store every memory, archive every detail. You write memoirs, establish foundations, endow scholarships. You think, this will keep the fire alive. But each attempt to control how you will be remembered transforms that memory into a static artifact, detached from the living pulse that once gave it meaning. A legacy is a living thing when others carry it naturally, when stories about you are told because they're useful, inspiring, or necessary. But when you try to lock it in glass, to freeze it in its perfect form, it stops breathing. The story becomes fixed, and fixed stories are brittle. They don't adapt, they don't change hands easily. People lose interest. They move on to fresher voices, newer causes. Think of historical figures who obsessed over their own image while alive. The monuments they built, the portraits they commissioned, the endless propaganda. Most of it now stands as a curiosity, not as influence. Their attempt to engineer how they'd be seen calcified them into relics, and relics gather dust. Meanwhile, others who never chased immortality, whose work spoke for itself, remain vivid in collective memory, passed down not because it was demanded, but because it was wanted. When we cling too tightly to preserving a legacy, we begin rewriting it to fit the way we want to be remembered, not the way we truly were. We omit the failures, polish the rough edges, amplify the triumphs, but perfection is forgettable. What people remember, What lingers is humanity, contradiction, the sense that the person was real. Over-sanitizing a legacy erases the very texture that might have made it worth keeping. Worse, when the drive to preserve becomes an obsession, it drains energy from the living part of life. You stop creating for the sake of the work itself and start creating for the plaque, the headline, the archive. The present becomes a staging ground for the future you'll never actually see. And the irony is that by focusing so much on the audience of tomorrow, you lose the authenticity that audience would have cherished most. There's also the paradox of exposure. The more you push your name into the world, the more you dilute its meaning. Overexposure breeds familiarity, and familiarity breeds forgetfulness. The statue that stands in the center of the square every day eventually becomes invisible to the people who pass it. A legacy constantly thrust in front of people's eyes risks becoming background noise. The most enduring legacies are often accidental. They grow organically in the minds of others, shaped by how the work or the life made them feel. They aren't micromanaged from beyond the grave, or even from the last years of life. They are seeds scattered by action, not by self-promotion, and they germinate in unexpected places and times. A letter found decades later, a kindness remembered by a stranger, an idea someone thought was their own, but was planted by you years earlier. When you try to preserve your legacy too aggressively, you also invite resistance. People resent being told what to remember. They start poking at the narrative, looking for cracks, and they will find them. Every human story has them. What survives best is not what is imposed, but what is discovered. And maybe that's the real lesson. The more we try to secure our place in the minds of the future, the less we allow the future to choose us. Legacy is not ownership. It's a gift given by others when they decide you mattered. You can't force that gift. You can only make something worthy of being given. The tragedy of the legacy oblivion effect is that in the act of guarding, we smother. The harder you try to hold on, the more you compress what was once expansive, and the more easily it crumbles. The names that last centuries are not always those with the biggest monuments, but those with the deepest roots in human experience, roots planted without knowing how far they would spread. So, perhaps the only way to truly preserve your legacy is to stop trying. Live it instead of embalming it. Let your work be flawed. Let your story be messy. Let the people who carry it forward shape it into what they need it to be. You will not be remembered exactly as you are. You will be remembered as you mattered. And that, if you can let go, is enough. Chaos-order duality. We think of order as the antidote to chaos, a shield against the unpredictable, a structure to keep life in place. We design systems, make rules, build hierarchies, and draw lines, all with the belief that we are taming the disorder around us. But hidden inside every act of organization is a seed of disruption, because every order we impose reshapes the world in ways we don't fully anticipate, creating new cracks where chaos can leak in. This is the chaos-order duality. It begins with the simplest human impulse, to arrange. A messy desk is cleaned, and now every item has its place. For a while, life feels smoother, but the moment something doesn't fit the system, a new document, a tool you didn't account for, the order resists it. That resistance demands workarounds, exceptions, hidden piles. And in time, your neatly organized space is cluttered again, except now the clutter is harder to navigate because it's trapped inside a structure designed to prevent it. The same happens on larger scales. Governments create laws to maintain order, but those laws can give rise to loopholes, black markets, and unintended consequences that breed new forms of disorder. Companies establish strict procedures to streamline efficiency, yet those same procedures can become so rigid that they slow innovation and create bottlenecks. Even in personal life, we try to schedule every hour to get control, but overscheduling often creates more stress, unexpected conflicts, and missed opportunities. This is because order is never neutral. It redirects energy. When you confine behavior within boundaries, the pressure doesn't vanish. It shifts. Like water hitting a dam, it finds another path. You may succeed in eliminating the chaos you can see, only to amplify the chaos you can't. History is full of examples. In ancient China, the Qin dynasty sought absolute order through strict legal codes and centralized power. They standardized weights, measures, and even writing systems. But the inflexible system they created, meant to ensure stability, sparked rebellions and collapsed within a generation. In nature, Ecosystems achieve balance not by eradicating chaos, but by weaving it into the structure: predators and prey, growth and decay, storm and calm. When humans try to fix these systems into a static order, unintended collapses often follow. On a psychological level, the same duality plays out within us. When we try to suppress every uncomfortable thought or emotion to maintain mental order, we often drive them underground where they grow stronger. The more we insist on a perfect inner calm, the more we become destabilized by anything that disrupts it. Emotional resilience doesn't come from eliminating chaos. It comes from learning how to coexist with it. Technology has amplified this duality to staggering levels. Algorithms organize the internet for us, filtering what we see to keep it relevant, clean, and structured. But this curated order has produced its own chaos. Information bubbles, echo chambers, viral misinformation. In trying to impose clarity, the system has multiplied the noise in ways we didn't predict. The chaos-order duality teaches us that every act of ordering is also an act of creation, of new variables, new imbalances, new vulnerabilities. This doesn't mean order is useless. Without it, we would be adrift in uncertainty, but it means order can never be final. It must be dynamic, flexible, and ready to adapt to the chaos it inevitably summons. Real mastery of this duality comes from designing systems with space for disorder, like a woven basket that can flex without breaking. It means leaving room in your schedule for the unexpected, creating laws that can be revised as society changes, and allowing yourself moments of mess without seeing them as failures. Because in the end, chaos and order are not enemies locked in battle. They are dance partners. Each step of order invites chaos to move in new ways, and each surge of chaos invites us to shape new order. To try to separate them completely is to miss the truth, that life is not the triumph of one over the other, but the endless movement between them. Predictive self-limitation. We like to believe that imagining the future gives us power over it, that if we can see the possibilities ahead, we can steer toward the ones we want and avoid the ones we fear. But the act of prediction is not neutral. The moment you start picturing your future, you begin shaping it, sometimes in ways that quietly cut away paths you might have taken. The mind loves patterns. It takes a few data points from your past, wraps them in the story of who you think you are, and projects them forward. You imagine yourself continuing in the same career, loving the same kind of people, making the same kind of choices. You think this is realism. But often, it's just repetition disguised as foresight. The danger is subtle. By predicting your future, you start behaving in ways that make that prediction come true. If you believe you'll fail at something, you prepare less, try less, or avoid it entirely, until failure is inevitable. If you believe you'll never leave your hometown, you don't seek opportunities elsewhere, and the prophecy fulfills itself. The belief becomes the boundary. Even when the prediction is positive, it can still shrink you. If you're certain you'll succeed at one specific goal, you might ignore other opportunities that don't fit that script. You narrow your focus so much that you stop seeing the possibilities that weren't part of the forecast. And in doing so, you trade the vast unpredictability of life for the comfort of a single fixed narrative. This is predictive self-limitation. The moment your imagined future becomes a cage, even if it looks like a plan, you think you're steering the ship, but in reality, you've already chosen the harbor, and you won't explore the waters beyond it because they don't match the map you've drawn in your head. It's not just personal. Societies do this too. Predictions about markets, technology, or culture shape the very actions that bring those predictions to life. Fear of economic collapse can trigger the behaviors that cause it. Expectations about political outcomes can drive people to vote, or not vote, in ways that make those outcomes real. The forecast doesn't just describe the future, it builds it. And once the mind believes it knows what's coming, it stops preparing for anything else. The unknown becomes invisible. You become blind to every potential future that doesn't fit the one you've already rehearsed. That's why real change so often comes from the unexpected, from events no one saw coming, that bypass the predictions entirely. The irony is that the only way to keep the future truly open is to stop gripping it so tightly, to allow space for outcomes you can't yet imagine, to admit that you don't know, and that not knowing is not weakness, but freedom. Because as soon as you lock yourself into one prediction, you begin making micro decisions that drag you toward it, no matter how quietly. This doesn't mean abandoning vision. It means holding it lightly. planning for possibilities, not certainties, preparing for the truth that the version of you that exists 5 years from now might want something entirely different than the version of you imagining it today. The future is not a single path waiting to be discovered. It's a network of roads, many of which you can't see until you're already walking. The more rigidly you predict, the fewer of those roads you will allow yourself to notice. The most dangerous prison is the one that feels like a map. Data dependence drift. We live in a world measured to the decimal, steps walked, hours slept. Likes earned, views counted, sales tracked. We build dashboards for our lives, staring at the moving numbers as if they were the heartbeat of meaning itself. At first, it feels empowering. Numbers give clarity, objectivity, control. But slowly, almost without noticing, we begin to serve the numbers instead of the truth they were meant to represent. This is the data dependence drift. The quiet slide from using metrics as tools to letting them dictate our sense of reality. Metrics begin as proxies. We can't measure customer happiness, so we count positive reviews. We can't measure artistic impact, so we track ticket sales. We can't measure love, so we count messages or anniversaries. These numbers give us something to grab onto, something visible in the fog of human complexity. But proxies are shadows, not the thing itself. The danger begins when we forget that the shadow isn't the object and start treating it as if it is. Take education. A school wants to improve learning, so it tracks standardized test scores. The intention is good. Better scores should mean better understanding. But soon, the teaching bends toward the test, not the student's real grasp of the material. Subjects not on the exam get neglected. Creativity shrinks. Curiosity fades. The score rises, but the soul of learning erodes. The metric has replaced the mission, or consider social media. You start posting to share what matters to you. Then you notice which posts get the most engagement. Slowly, the shape of what you share shifts, not toward what's truest, but toward what the algorithm rewards. The number becomes the compass, and you follow it without realizing you've stopped charting your own course. You may get more likes, but you lose the unfiltered self that once lived behind them. This drift is subtle because metrics feel like truth. They are clean, exact, and comparable. Reality is messy, uncertain, and hard to weigh. When the two conflict, the human mind often trusts the number over the nuance. If the metric says productivity is high, we assume all is well, even if morale is crumbling and burnout is spreading like a shadow through the team. The story the number tells feels more real than the one you can see with your own eyes. Businesses fall into this trap often. Chasing quarterly profits can lead to short-term boosts at the expense of long-term health. No, a company might slash costs to meet a financial target, quietly damaging product quality, employee loyalty, or brand trust. On paper, the metric is a success. In reality, it's a time bomb. But by the time the real damage appears, the decision makers have already celebrated the win that set it in motion. Data dependence. Drift doesn't just distort actions. It reshapes values. When the metric becomes the mission, the original purpose fades from view. A hospital that starts measuring patient throughput may start valuing speed over care. A nonprofit that measures only donations may start valuing donors over the people it was meant to help. The metric is not inherently bad. It's the narrowing of vision that turns it into a compass pointing away from what truly matters. The irony is that the more we depend on data, the more blind spots we create. Not everything of value can be counted. Not every important change shows up in a chart. Trust, resilience, meaning, these resist neat quantification. And yet, in a metric-driven culture, the invisible often gets ignored until it collapses. We can be surrounded by warning signs that don't fit into our tracking system and miss them entirely. Escaping the drift requires a kind of double vision, using metrics while never forgetting their limits. Numbers can guide, but they should never rule. They should sit in service to the deeper goals, not replace them. That means regularly asking, what are we not measuring? What could be getting worse while the metric gets better? Have we confused the indicator for the reality? The most dangerous part of the data dependence drift is that it feels like progress. The graphs go up, the dashboards glow green, the reports look good. Meanwhile, the heart of the work, the reason it mattered in the first place, grows faint. And when you finally look up from the numbers, you may find you've reached the wrong destination entirely, having followed a perfect map to the wrong place. Metrics should be like stars, distant points to navigate by, not walls to cage us in. They can light the way, but they are not the journey. If we let them become the destination, we risk living in a world where the numbers look perfect, even as the meaning disappears. And when meaning vanishes, no metric, no matter how high, can fill the emptiness it leaves behind. Infinite scroll syndrome. It starts with a simple swipe. A flick of your thumb, a shift of your eyes, a momentary scroll into something new. You tell yourself it's just for a minute, just to see what's happening, just to check in. But the feed is bottomless, and the next piece is already loading before you've fully seen the last. You are never in silence, never in stillness, always mid-transition from one stimulus to the next. At first, it feels harmless, even exciting. Every scroll is a surprise, an image, a joke, a fact, a tragedy, a celebration. You are tasting the world in rapid bursts, each bite different from the last. And in the moment, it feels like you are absorbing so much. But days later, you realize you can't recall any of it clearly. The hours you spent scrolling condense into a vague haze, an atmosphere of impressions without anchor. This is the paradox of infinite scroll. The more you consume, the less you retain. Not because the content is meaningless, but because your mind never stays with it long enough to let it settle. You move on before memory can take root. The brain isn't a hard drive, it's a garden. And in a garden, nothing grows when you keep uprooting the soil every few seconds. Over time, this constant input reshapes the way you think. The mind adapts to the rhythm of the scroll, short bursts, quick rewards, no patience for depth. Long-form ideas feel heavier, harder to digest. You find yourself skimming books, skipping through videos, scanning articles for bold text instead of reading the sentences around it. You aren't looking for understanding anymore. You're looking for the next hit of novelty. And the worst part is how easy it becomes to confuse exposure with knowledge. You feel informed because you've seen so much, but it's like staring out the window of a speeding train. You've passed countless scenes without really entering any of them. You might be able to recall a headline, a meme, a striking image, but the context, the why of it, slips away. The scroll has no edges, and without edges, there is nothing for memory to grip. Infinite scroll syndrome isn't just forgetfulness, it's a kind of mental erosion. It trains you to live only in the moment between the last piece of content and the next. And because that moment is so brief, you're never really in it. You're always leaning forward, hungry for the next thing, before the current thing is even finished. Eventually, even important moments blur this way. A conversation with a friend competes with the urge to check what else is happening. A quiet walk feels empty without a feed in your hand. You start to fear boredom, not because boredom is painful, but because you've forgotten what it's for. You've lost the space where thoughts have time to breathe, where experiences have time to become memories. The tragedy is subtle. It's not that infinite scroll fills your mind with useless things. It's that it fills your mind so quickly nothing has the time to become useful. It's a constant flooding of the senses, leaving no place for meaning to settle. And the more you drown in it, the more you mistake the sensation of being full for the reality of being nourished. The escape isn't about abandoning the scroll entirely. It's about stopping inside it, pausing when something catches you, letting it echo before you move on. It's about giving your mind the rare gift of stillness between inputs. Because without stillness, memory fades into a smear, and the only thing you're left with is the motion of your thumb. Moving, 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 with nothing to hold on to. Knowledge ignorance. Paradox. We are taught to see knowledge as a ladder, each rung a piece of truth, each climb a step toward mastery. At first, the climb feels certain. Every fact learned is solid beneath your feet. You can measure your progress in the neat accumulation of answers, and you believe, quietly, confidently, that one day the ladder will take you to a place where you can see it all. But then, something happens. The higher you climb, the more the horizon expands. Each answer doesn't close a door, it opens 10 more. Every fact reveals a network of questions beneath it, questions that branch endlessly, twisting into places you didn't even know existed. You look back at where you started, and realize that the ground you thought was solid was actually a small island in an ocean you couldn't yet see. The paradox of knowledge is cruel in its clarity. The more you know, the more acutely you become aware of how little you know. A beginner can hold the illusion of completeness. An expert knows there is no such thing. Think of astronomy. We once mapped the stars with certainty, naming constellations and believing we understood the heavens. Then telescopes revealed galaxies beyond our own. Then deeper telescopes revealed that the vast majority of the universe is made of dark matter and dark energy, things we cannot see, cannot touch, cannot truly comprehend. Each breakthrough didn't shrink the mystery, it widened it. Now we know more than ever before, but also know that most of existence is hidden from us. Or think of medicine. We can repair hearts, replace joints, manipulate DNA itself. Yet, for every disease we learn to cure, a dozen more complexities arise. We treat symptoms and uncover new mechanisms we don't understand. The human body is not a machine to be fully mastered. It is a universe of interactions, chemical whispers, and biological accidents that reveal new secrets only when we are humble enough to admit we still don't know. The ignorance was always there. We just couldn't see it until we had enough light to illuminate its vastness. And the more powerful our light becomes, the more we realize the darkness will always be infinitely larger. This realization can be unsettling. We want our knowledge to bring certainty, stability, control. But in truth, real knowledge dismantles illusions. It forces us to see the limits of our perception, to accept that we are navigating a map that will never be complete. For some, this is terrifying, proof that mastery is an illusion. For others, it is liberation, the freedom to learn without the pressure of ever finishing. The greatest thinkers have always carried this paradox like a secret. Socrates admitted he knew nothing. Newton, after uncovering the laws of motion, compared himself to a child playing on the shore while the great ocean of truth lay undiscovered before him. Even in our personal lives, the closer we examine ourselves, the roots of our fears, the shapes of our desires, the more we discover patterns and contradictions we can't fully untangle. And yet, there is a quiet beauty here. The more we see of what we don't know, the richer life becomes. Mystery is not a defect in the world. It's the source of its depth. A painting you understand completely becomes decoration. A painting that keeps revealing new details becomes a companion. The universe is the same. Its endless unanswered questions are not failures of knowledge, but invitations to keep seeking. The danger comes when we mistake a little knowledge for the whole picture. This is the arrogance of the shallow learner, convinced of mastery, because they haven't yet reached the point where their learning reveals the vastness beyond it. In this way, ignorance wears two faces, the simple not knowing of the beginner and the complex not knowing of the wise. The first feels small, the second feels infinite. The knowledge-ignorance paradox teaches us that wisdom is not the elimination of uncertainty. It is learning to live inside it, to speak confidently when we must, but to never forget that our words rest on shifting ground, to chase understanding, knowing it will always run ahead, to let curiosity be endless because the unknown is endless. And maybe that's the point. The goal was never to reach the top of the ladder. The goal was to keep climbing, not for the view, but for the way each new rung changes the way we see everything beneath us. Because in the end, it is not knowing that makes us wise. It is knowing how much we do not know. Convenience dependency. We live in an age where almost nothing requires struggle. Food arrives with a few taps. Answers appear in seconds. Doors unlock with a fingerprint, bills pay themselves. Navigation tells us exactly where to turn. It feels like magic, this web of instant solutions. But beneath the glow of convenience lies a slow, silent trade. The more we outsource difficulty, the more fragile we become when difficulty inevitably arrives. This is the danger of convenience dependency. Convenience begins as a gift. It frees time, removes friction, lets us focus on what matters most. Why waste an hour hunting for information when a search engine can deliver it instantly? Why wrestle with directions when GPS can lead you precisely? These tools promise to remove frustration from life, and they do. But frustration, it turns out, is not just an obstacle, it's also a muscle. And when we never use it, it atrophies. A mind that never gets lost learns less about navigation. A body that never strains learns less about endurance. A person who never has to solve a problem without help slowly loses the confidence to try. And when the systems we rely on fail, when the GPS glitches, when the delivery doesn't come, when the network goes down, we find ourselves unprepared, as though stripped of basic survival instincts. This erosion doesn't happen in sudden collapse. It happens in small, unnoticed ways. The fewer phone numbers you remember because they're saved in your contacts, the less you feel capable without your device. The fewer meals you cook from scratch, the less you know how to feed yourself without packaging and microwaves. The fewer arguments you navigate in person, the less equipped you are to resolve conflict face to face. The worst part is that convenience doesn't just remove effort, it changes our expectations. Waiting becomes intolerable. Struggle feels unnatural. We start to believe that anything difficult is broken, that something is wrong if a solution isn't immediate. And when life inevitably presents problems that require time, patience, and creativity, we feel anxiety, not readiness. History shows us that resilience is born from necessity. Generations before us learned to mend their clothes because they had no store to replace them. They learned to read maps because getting lost meant danger. They learned to improvise repairs because waiting for help could mean waiting forever. These skills were not hobbies, they were survival. And though we may no longer face the same hardships, the principle remains. Capability grows in the absence of ease. Technology companies know that the easier they make something, the more dependent we become. And dependency is profitable. A person who can solve their own problem is not a repeat customer. A person who needs the system every time is. This is why each year, our tools become not just more advanced, but more opaque. Devices are harder to repair. Software hides its complexity. We are given sleek surfaces to interact with, but no access to the machinery underneath. The less we understand, the more we must rely. Breaking free from convenience dependency doesn't mean rejecting comfort. It means intentionally practicing difficulty. Choosing to cook a meal from raw ingredients. Walking somewhere without GPS. Trying to remember a number instead of looking it up. Fixing something before replacing it. These small acts keep our problem-solving muscles alive, so that when real difficulty comes, we are not helpless. The truth is, convenience is a powerful servant, but a terrible master. It should support our abilities, not replace them. If we let it do the thinking, the building, the enduring for us, then slowly, without realizing, we will lose the very capacities that make us independent. Because when everything is easy, nothing prepares us for when it's not. And in that moment, we'll discover that the hardest thing to regain is the resilience we gave away for the sake of never feeling inconvenience at all. Global-local disconnect. You wake up and the first thing you see isn't your street, your neighborhood, or your city. It's the world. A screen lights up with headlines from continents away. Floods in one hemisphere, elections in another, disasters unfolding thousands of miles from your front door. You take it in before you've even looked outside your own window. You know what's happening on the other side of the planet before you know what the weather is where you stand. This is the gift and the curse of globalization. We're more connected than any generation before us. We can see, hear, and respond to events anywhere in seconds. We can learn the struggles of strangers oceans away. But with every global connection we strengthen, the ties to our immediate surroundings grow weaker. You can know the political climate of a distant country better than the names of your neighbors. You can be deeply invested in the culture of a place you've never set foot in, while barely noticing the subtle changes in your own town. You can rally online for causes halfway across the world, while ignoring the small, solvable problems outside your door. The awareness feels like engagement, but it's often a form of distance. The global scale dwarfs the local until it feels irrelevant. Why care about the pothole on your street when cities you've never seen are sinking? Why talk to the shop owner down the block when you can debate global policy with strangers online? The immediate becomes invisible under the shadow of the immense. And yet, the immense is where we have the least power. We can watch it, we can comment on it, but most of it is beyond our reach. Meanwhile, the small and local, the places where our actions could matter, fade from our focus. The irony is that while globalization gives us the widest field of vision in human history, it also blinds us to the ground beneath our feet. We've learned to measure importance by scale. A story about one person's struggle in our own community seems too small to matter when measured against the constant flood of global crises. But the truth is, the local is where the global begins. The world isn't changed by knowing everything. It's changed by acting where you stand. When every horizon is visible, no single one feels urgent. Our sense of belonging stretches so thin that it becomes transparent. We feel like citizens of the world, but residents of nowhere. We carry the weight of global events on our minds, but our hands remain empty in our own spaces. And there's a cost to this detachment. The more we withdraw from our immediate environments, the less resilient they become. A neighborhood is more than a cluster of buildings. It's a network of relationships, trust, and shared responsibility. When those fade, the physical place weakens, and a weakened local world can't sustain the global connections we take for granted. It's not about choosing between global and local. It's about realizing that without the local, the global is hollow. We need to remember the faces, the voices, the places that actually touch our lives, to turn some of our attention from the endless horizon back to the small patch of ground that holds us up. Because the paradox of the global-local disconnect is that while we are more aware of the world than ever before, we risk losing the one part of it we can truly call home. Abundance, scarcity illusion. It's the strangest trick the mind can play. You finally get more of what you've always wanted, and instead of feeling satisfied, you feel emptier. You upgrade your home, and now the old furniture looks inadequate. You earn more money, and suddenly your expenses swell to meet it. You gain followers, and the praise you once cherished now feels too small. This is the abundance scarcity illusion, the paradox where having more deepens the feeling that you don't have enough. It begins with a quiet shift in baseline. Before abundance, each gain feels monumental. You savor it, measure it against the memory of going without. But once abundance becomes your norm, the mind resets its scale. What once felt like a luxury becomes the bare minimum. The extraordinary becomes expected. And when the expected is met, there's no joy. Only the restless sense that there's still more you could have. This illusion thrives because abundance changes our point of comparison. A person with one pair of shoes compares themselves to someone with none. A person with 20 pairs compares themselves to someone with 50. The more we have, the higher we look for reference points, until our standards become so inflated that satisfaction is nearly impossible. Abundance doesn't just raise our quality of life. It raises the bar for what we believe we need to feel content. Social media amplifies this effect to a relentless degree. Even if you are wealthier, healthier, or more connected than you've ever been, you can scroll for 30 seconds and find someone who seems to have more beauty, more adventure, more success. And because the human brain evolved to track status within small communities, we are not built to process this constant comparison to a global highlight reel. In ancient terms, it's like living in a village of 100 people and somehow believing you are failing because two strangers across the ocean caught a bigger fish. Abundance can also dull gratitude. When resources are scarce, we treasure them because they are fragile. When they are plentiful, our attention drifts from what we have to what is missing. And here lies the trap. The feeling of scarcity no longer depends on reality, it depends on expectation. The mind begins to chase an ever-receding horizon, mistaking it for progress, never realizing that the finish line moves with every step. We see this in economies as well. As societies grow wealthier, they often become less happy. Surveys in some of the richest nations show rising dissatisfaction despite record levels of comfort and opportunity. This is not because people are worse off. It's because abundance shifts the scale of what they think enough looks like. And when enough is defined by an ever-growing appetite, it is by definition unreachable. Even in personal ambition, the illusion takes hold. You achieve a goal you once thought would change everything. But instead of contentment, you feel a new void. The mountain you climbed reveals a higher peak beyond it, and you can't help but chase it, believing the next summit will finally bring peace. But abundance rarely grants closure. It often opens more doors than it closes, each one leading to a new craving. The abundant scarcity illusion is powerful because it hides inside what we believe is success. It whispers that the answer is just one step further, one purchase more, one milestone away. It convinces us that the reason we still feel unsatisfied is because we haven't reached the right level yet, when in reality, satisfaction isn't a level at all, it's a skill. Without learning it, no amount will ever feel like enough. Escaping this illusion requires regrounding. Noticing what already exists in your life that was once only a dream. Measuring progress against your own past instead of someone else's present. And perhaps most importantly, recognizing that abundance without perspective becomes a kind of scarcity in disguise, because it robs you of the ability to feel full. More is not bad, but when more becomes the measure of worth, you can drown in it and still feel thirsty. True abundance is not in the endless accumulation of things, experiences, or status. It's in the rare ability to see the horizon, stop walking toward it for a moment, and realize that where you are was once far enough. Nomad's rootlessness paradox. It begins as a dream so pure, it feels immune to contradiction. The freedom to go anywhere. No anchors, no ties, no obligations pulling you back. The world is open, its map no longer an obstacle but an invitation. You imagine yourself carrying only what you need, moving when you choose, waking up to new skylines as easily as turning a page in a book. The idea itself hums with possibility. At first, the movement feels like oxygen. Every departure is a shedding of weight, every arrival a rebirth. You're no longer confined to the habits, the streets, the conversations that once defined your days. You're fluid now, untethered. Your sense of self expands to include mountains, cities, oceans, deserts. You can disappear from one life and surface in another without explanation. The people you meet on the way see only the version of you that fits the moment. And there's a strange thrill in knowing that no one has the whole story. But over time, something quieter begins to form, a gap you can't quite name. You notice it when someone asks, "Where are you from?" And you hesitate, not because you don't know, but because the answer feels incomplete. You notice it when friends you've met along the way grow closer to each other in your absence, when conversations fill with references you weren't there for, when inside jokes pass over you like foreign weather. You've been everywhere, and yet, somehow, you're not in anything. The paradox emerges slowly. The more places you touch, the less any single place seems to claim you. You collect landscapes the way others collect photographs, but each one exists in isolation, unmoored from the continuity of belonging. You've stood under 100 different skies, yet there's no single sky you look up to and think, "This is mine." Belonging isn't just about presence, it's about repetition. It's built in the quiet return to the same streets, the same faces, the same rhythms until they fold you into their pattern. But when you're always moving, repetition becomes scarcity. The bonds you form are brief and bright, intense in the moment, but fragile against distance. You're known in fragments, loved for a night, remembered for a season, but rarely carried into the fabric of someone's daily life. And so the freedom you chased begins to carry its own weight. The horizon is still open, but the pull toward it feels less like choice and more like inertia. You tell yourself you could stop anywhere, settle down if you wanted to. But when you imagine it, you realize there's nowhere you choose, because every place feels equally foreign and equally yours. The nomad's rootlessness paradox isn't about regret. It's about the quiet cost hidden inside boundless freedom. To belong nowhere is to never fully be missed, never fully be expected, never fully be woven into the invisible threads that make a place feel like home. And while that can be liberating, it can also leave you as a permanent visitor in your own life. Welcome everywhere, but truly of nowhere. The question that lingers isn't whether you should keep moving. It's whether you can find a way to carry belonging with you, to plant roots not in a place, but in people, in rituals, in something that survives distance. Because without that, the journey never ends. It just circles the globe, over and over, until every view begins to feel the same. Meaning and meaninglessness. We grow up believing that meaning is something waiting for us out there, hidden like a buried treasure in the world's deep soil. We imagine that if we dig far enough, read enough, live enough, we will uncover it, some pure, universal truth that explains why we are here, what we are for, and how all of this fits together. It feels almost inevitable, as if the universe would be incomplete without such a purpose built into it. But the longer we search, the more the pattern changes. We look into the night sky, expecting to find a script written in the stars, only to realize the constellations are shapes we drew ourselves. We dive into history, searching for signs of a cosmic plan, and instead find generations of humans assigning meaning to whatever they could not control: storms, harvests, victories, disasters, each culture spinning its own explanation. The deeper we go, the more it becomes clear. Meaning isn't discovered, it's invented. This realization can feel like a betrayal. We want meaning to be something absolute, something that existed before us and will remain after us. But the evidence suggests that meaning is not an ingredient in the universe. It's a lens we crafted to make the universe bearable. Mountains don't know they are sacred. Oceans don't know they are beautiful. These are truths we've assigned to them, not truths they carry on their own. At first, this can be terrifying. If meaning is something we made up, then the floor drops away beneath our lives. We are no longer actors following a divine script, but improvisers on a stage with no lines, no director, and no guarantee anyone is watching. The instinct is to resist this thought, to double down on familiar stories that promise there is a reason for all of this, even if we can't yet see it. But if we let the realization settle, something unexpected happens. The absence of universal meaning doesn't make life empty. It makes it open. If meaning is a human invention, then it is also a human art. We are not prisoners of some pre-written destiny. We are authors with an infinite page count. Our purposes do not have to be handed down. They can be built, shaped, and even remade when they no longer serve us. This is why two people can live in the same world, under the same sun, and find utterly different reasons to go on. One may see their life's meaning in raising a child, another in building a city, another in mastering a craft. None of these purposes are built into reality. They exist because humans decided they mattered, and the fact that they are chosen doesn't make them weaker. It makes them deeply personal. The search for meaning often exposes just how much of what we believe is shaped by the stories we've inherited. Myths, religions, philosophies, all of them are elaborate frameworks of meaning humans built to live inside. They are scaffolds for the soul, allowing us to climb higher than despair. But even the most sacred framework is still a construction, and once you see the scaffolding, you can't pretend it's the sky. The danger lies not in admitting meaning is human-made, but in mistaking that for futility. Some fall into nihilism, convinced that if meaning isn't cosmic, it isn't real. But meaning is real in the same way love is real, or beauty is real, not because it exists independent of us, but because we experience it. The sunrise doesn't care if we call it beautiful, but the act of seeing it as beautiful changes us. That is the quiet magic of our invention. Paradoxically, realizing meaning is constructed can make it stronger. You are no longer chasing some elusive external truth. You are crafting a truth that fits the contours of your own life. You can choose meanings that nourish you, discard those that harm you, and recognize when others are trying to impose meanings that serve them instead of you. Perhaps the ultimate meaning of life is not to find meaning, but to make it, and to accept that what we make will always be provisional, imperfect, and temporary. Meaning can evolve as we do. It can collapse and be rebuilt. It can be small enough to fit in a single moment, or vast enough to guide a lifetime. Its impermanence does not weaken it. If anything, it forces us to live it more fully, knowing it is ours only for a while. In the end, the search for meaning may reveal that the universe is silent, but we are not. We are the ones speaking into the void, and in that act, fragile, temporary, human, we find the very thing we were looking for all along.